Chapter 35:30. Heavenly Wolf Bet. Nye Tian brought Duanmulu to Su Kuanga's side. The latter's face was gloomy, as if he was worried about Nye Tian. "Brother Su, please help me take care of Duanmulu," Nye Tian said calmly with an indifferent expression. Su Kuanga nodded, as if he wanted to say something, but didn't. Nye Tian nodded slightly, and warned Duanmulu that no matter what happened, he must stay by Su Kuanga's side. In fact, he was very curious about the relationship between Su Kuanga and Su Qing, and why Su Qing would come here to help him. However, Su Kuanga didn't say, and he didn't ask. "Nye Tian, be careful," Su Kuanga said solemnly, nodding slightly. He was very worried for Nye Tian, even though the latter was very strong and had even defeated him. However, Nye Tian didn't know what kind of opponent he would face in the Heavenly Wolf Challenge. Very few martial artists in the wolf-slave field succeeded in challenging the Heavenly Wolf. In the last tens of thousands of years, no one had succeeded. In particular, Nye Tian's strength was very awkward, second layer of heavenly rhythm. If he was a stage 9 pseudo-saint or a stage 9 heavenly rhythm, the situation would be much better. He was at the second layer of heavenly rhythm, but he had to face countless stage 9 heavenly rhythm martial artists. Would Nye Tian be able to win 100 matches in a row, or last for 5 days in the arena? "Nye Tian, go on stage." At this time, Su Cheng's voice sounded, and he said solemnly. Nye Tian nodded slightly, smiled faintly at Su Kuanga and Duanmulu, and then his figure moved, stepping into the arena. He knew that once he stepped foot into the martial arena, he would have to face countless bitter battles. "Teacher!" Duanmulu looked at Nye Tian's figure. His eyes trembled, and he secretly clenched his fists. He hated himself for being too weak and not being able to help Nye Tian. "Don't worry, he will be fine." Su Kuanga comforted Duanmulu, but his expression was not that calm. "I hereby announce that Nye Tian's challenge to the Heavenly Wolf begins." At this moment, Su Cheng's gaze swept across the crowd and he announced in a loud voice. At this moment, almost all the people in the wolf-slave field had their eyes focused on Nye Tian. Everyone wanted to see how far this Heavenly Wolf challenger could go. "I bid 100 top-grade Saint Crystals, Heavenly Wolf Bet." Then, Shun Han's voice rang out. He said loudly, "Which friend wants to get rich? Hurry up and enter the arena." "Heavenly Wolf Bet?" Nye Tian looked at Shun Han and couldn't help but frown. He was stunned for a moment, not knowing what that meant. When the crowd heard Shun Han's words, they immediately became excited. "Killing a cultivator at the second stage of Heaven Rhythm for 100 Supreme Grade Saint Crystals. That's a great deal. Is this kid's life that valuable? It's actually worth 100 top-grade Saint Crystals. He offended someone from 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce, so someone is willing to pay for his life." Everyone discussed as they looked at Nye Tian with great excitement, as if they were staring at a piece of fat meat. The so-called Heavenly Wolf Bet was, in fact, someone buying the life of the person who challenged the Heavenly Wolf. Shun Han had offered 100 top-grade Saint Crystals for the Heavenly Wolf Bet, so whoever killed Nye Tian would receive this 100 Heavenly Wolf Bet. Of course, if Nye Tian successfully challenged the Heavenly Wolf challenger, the Heavenly Wolf Bet would be his. The life of a cultivator at the second stage of Heaven Rhythm was actually worth 100 top-grade Saint Crystals. This already made everyone unable to hold back. "Let me try." In the next moment, a deep roar rang out, and a burly figure appeared in the arena. He stared at Nye Tian with a pair of wolf-like eyes that were filled with killing intent. Nye Tian looked at this person and narrowed his eyes slightly before smiling faintly. "You can't get 100 top-grade Saint Crystals." "Arrogant." The man let out a low roar as his aura surged crazily. A terrifying power that could topple mountains and overturn the seas slammed into the void. "Die." The next moment, the man let out a low roar and attacked directly. A violent fist shadow flew out and bombarded towards Nye Tian. Nie Tian stood in place like a mountain, not moving an inch. Only when the fist shadow was less than 10 meters away from him did he move. Taking a step forward, a sword intent shot out and shattered the fist shadow. Pooh! Then, the sound of flesh tearing rang out as a bloody hole appeared on the man's chest. Blood gushed out and dyed his body red. How is this possible? The man took a few steps back before stabilizing himself and looking at Nie Tian in horror, completely unable to believe the scene in front of him. He didn't even see where the sword intent came from before his body was pierced through. This kid is terrifying. The crowd was also stunned when they saw this scene. Not many people saw when Nie Tian made his move. Nie Tian's sword intent was extremely sharp and powerful, exceeding everyone's expectations. "I won't kill you. Piss off," Nie Tian said coldly while looking at the man. His first opponent was a second-layer heaven rhythm cultivator like him, but the latter was like a fish on a chopping block in front of him. Nie Tian didn't want to kill too much, so he spared his opponent's life. He just wanted everyone to know that he, Nie Tian, was not a weakling. Thank you." The man's eyes flickered. After he reacted, he thanked Lin Fan with a trembling voice and left. No matter how stupid he was, he knew that Nie Tian had gone easy on him. Otherwise, he would have been dead by now. The crowd was silent for a while before someone started to speak. "This kid is a little strange. It looks like the battle of the Heavenly Wolf is going to be interesting. His strength is indeed much stronger than cultivators of the same level, but that won't change anything. At most, he'll live a little longer. Yeah, he's only in the second-layer heaven rhythm. If he meets a ninth-layer heaven rhythm cultivator, he'll be killed in one move." The crowd started to re-evaluate Nie Tian's strength, but everyone was sure that Nie Tian wouldn't be able to hold on for long. "I'll bid another 100 top-grade Saint Crystals," Shen Han shouted at this moment. Nie Tian easily defeated his first challenger, proving his strength. This made the other challengers a little afraid. Many of them wanted to watch a little longer, waiting for the Heavenly Wolf bet to add up. Shen Han added another 100 top-grade Saint Crystals, doubling the Heavenly Wolf bet. "I'll bid 10 top-grade Saint Crystals. I'll bid 7 top-grade Saint Crystals. I'll bid 20 top-grade Saint Crystals." Following that, more voices rang out, adding the Heavenly Wolf bet. Most of these people were busybodies. They wanted the battle of the Heavenly Wolf bet to continue, increasing the bet and attracting even stronger cultivators to challenge them. Perhaps the Heavenly Wolf bet wasn't too high right now, but as it went down, it would only get higher and higher. In the end, it might reach an unimaginable level. After all, everyone could raise their bet. In any case, it was just some money. As long as they could watch an exciting match, they didn't care. "I'll go." At this moment, someone finally couldn't hold back anymore. He roared and stepped onto the stage. Chapter 35-31. Fatal Temptation, Someone's Going Up. Seeing a cultivator appear on the stage, everyone's eyes trembled and they shouted in surprise. How can this kind of person be Nie Tian's opponent? Su Kuanga frowned and shook his head with a smile. The people who stood up to challenge obviously didn't know Nie Tian's true strength. They were just giving themselves up. "Kid, your head is too valuable. You can't blame me for this." On the martial arena, the martial artist laughed coldly as he stared at Nie Tian with incomparably murderous eyes and spoke in a ghastly tone. "I only gave you a warning in the first round. I won't be lenient in the second round." Nie Tian looked at the cultivator and said with a faint smile, "Unfortunately, you will be the first sacrifice on my path to defeat the Heavenly Wolf." He didn't kill the first person as a warning, but he wouldn't be lenient with the second person. He had to let everyone see how strong and ruthless he was with his strength and methods. "Really?" The man looked at Nie Tian and clearly felt a strong sense of danger, but he still managed to maintain his composure. He sneered and released his aura, attacking brazenly. Bang! However, at the same time, Nyetian also made his move. A sword intent whistled through the air, extremely sharp. Before anyone could react, a dull sound rang out, and that cultivator turned into a pool of blood. Not even his bones remained. This. Everyone's eyes widened as they stared at Nyetian in astonishment. A cultivator in the third layer of heavenly charm died just like that. It was shocking. It should be known that even in the holy world, Sage Realm cultivators were not that common. Most importantly, Nyetian's method of killing was too easy. He only used sword intent. No sword moves, just sword intent. Without a doubt, Nyetian's true strength was far beyond what everyone had seen. The scene fell silent once again. Everyone's eyes were filled with confusion and apprehension as they looked at Nyetian. Next, Nyetian stood in midair above the arena as the corners of his mouth twitched as he spoke indifferently. But after his voice fell, the entire arena was silent for a long time. No one responded. It was obvious that those powerful martial artists did not want to make a move yet. I bid 100 top-grade Saint Crystals, plus the Heavenly Wolf bet. I bid a second-order Saint Core and Heavenly Wolf bet. I offer a first-stage Saint Pill, plus the Heavenly Wolf bet. Following that, another round of bets could be heard. The crowd seemed to have gone crazy, raising their bets one after another, hoping that someone would challenge Nyetian. A moment later, the serious stakes had increased to an unimaginable level. Let me announce that the Heavenly Wolf bet has now been increased to 3,000 top-quality Saint Crystals, 7 Saint Cores, 6 Saint Pills, and a Sacred Array Scroll. At this moment, one of the people from the Wolf Slave Farm announced the Heavenly Wolf bet. When the crowd heard this person's words, their eyes couldn't help but tremble in shock. This time, the Heavenly Wolf bet had reached such an astonishing level after only 2 rounds. It was too terrifying. Nyetian frowned. He was also very shocked. 3,000 top-quality Saint Crystals, Saint Cores, Saint Pills, and Sacred Array Scroll were too tempting. One had to know that when Nyetian bought the third-stage Soul Concentration Scroll, he only spent 400 top-quality Saint Crystals. And the Heavenly Wolf bet was just the beginning. Next, the Heavenly Wolf bet would accumulate to an unimaginable level. With so many Heavenly Wolf bets, many martial artists would take the risk out of desperation. Let me do it. As expected, there was finally a martial artist who couldn't resist the temptation and stood up. Nyetian faced the challenger with an indifferent expression. This challenger was also not strong, only at the 4th stage Heavenly Rhythm. As expected, Nyetian won the 3rd round with a single move. At this moment, he didn't show the slightest bit of mercy. His first move was to kill his opponent. Since these people were trying to kill him, why should he show mercy? After half a day, Nyetian won 19 rounds in a row, and the strongest opponent he had defeated was at the 7th stage Heavenly Rhythm. More importantly, he hadn't even drawn his sword so far. Everyone could tell that Nyetian was a swordsman. Therefore, even before he drew his sword, his true battle prowess was already immeasurable. At this moment, the way everyone looked at Nyetian gradually changed. They couldn't hide the shock and fear in their hearts. At this moment, they had no choice but to re-evaluate Nyetian's strength. This kid is too terrifying. He can easily kill a 7th-stage Heavenly Rhythm martial artist with the strength of a 2nd-stage Heavenly Rhythm martial artist. He's too strong. He still hasn't drawn his sword. I wonder who will be the first to make him draw his sword. Those who challenged him before weren't very strong. I wonder how far this kid can go. As the crowd discussed, their eyes became blazing. This time, the Heavenly Wolf challenge had successfully aroused everyone's curiosity. At this moment, someone from the Wolf Slave Field announced the Heavenly Wolf challenge again. I hereby announce that the Heavenly Wolf bet has increased to 40,000 top-grade Saint Crystals, 57 Saint Cores, 63 Saint Pills, 7 Sacred Array Scrolls, and a Fate Art. When everyone heard this, their eyes became dull. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. Nie Tian had only won 19 rounds, but the Heavenly Wolf bet had increased to such an exaggerated level. Who knew what the Heavenly Wolf bet would be if Nie Tian won a few dozen more rounds? Are these people crazy? Su Kuangwang frowned and his expression was very ugly. He knew that the higher the Heavenly Wolf bet, the more dangerous the situation Nie Tian was in. Such a high Heavenly Wolf bet would not only attract the cultivators present, but it would also attract other cultivators from the 7th Sacred Cultivator world and even attract top assassins. However, the higher the Heavenly Wolf bet was, the more benefits it would bring to Nie Tian. If he won, the Heavenly Wolf bet would be his. This was an unimaginable amount of wealth. Most of the people present who could enter the wolf slave field were cultivators from big forces and families. With so many people paying together, the Heavenly Wolf bet was very high. At this moment, Nie Tian had an indifferent expression. He knew that the cultivators in front of him were nothing. The ones who could really threaten him were at the back. Following that, cultivators continued to challenge him because the temptation of the Heavenly Wolf bet was too great. One day later, Nie Tian won 60 rounds in a row. And the strongest opponent he met was a cultivator at the 9th level of Heavenly Charm. However, he still didn't draw his sword. Even when facing that 9th level Heavenly Charm cultivator, he used his sword intent and the power of his martial body to directly kill him. At this moment, the entire audience was silent. Everyone looked at Nie Tian as if they were looking at a monster. Nie Tian was really too terrifying. At this moment, no one dared to guess where Nie Tian's limit was. Nie Tian didn't draw his sword, which meant that he hadn't used his true strength. At this time, the Heavenly Wolf bet had piled up to a number: 300,000 top-grade Saint Crystals, thousands of Saint Cores, thousands of Saint Elixir pills, dozens of Sacred Array scrolls, and even enchantment scrolls, all kinds of life force and other things. When a cultivator's strength reached a certain level, these material things were relatively less important. However, when these materials reached a certain level and were very useful to the cultivator, it became a very fatal temptation. At this time, even the Heavenly Mandate Realm powerhouses were tempted. Unfortunately, they were not qualified to go on stage. Chapter 35-32. Cold Iron Body? When Nie Tian saw the martial artist that appeared on the stage, he could not help but frown and exclaim in surprise. At this moment, the martial artist that appeared in front of him was a giant with a height of nearly 3 meters. The latter stood there, giving people a feeling of an extremely strong explosive power, like an iron tower. Moreover, his entire body surged with an extremely terrifying aura, vigorous and mighty, as heavy and imposing as a mountain. Tai Clan's people. When everyone saw that person, their faces suddenly changed and they immediately cried out in alarm. No one had expected that even the Tai Clan's people would appear. In the Wolf's Night Mountain, there were 7 great family forces. Their status was very high and there were many experts in the family. Su Kuang's Su clan and Ming Tai's Ming clan were one of them. At this moment, the giant martial artist was from the Tai clan, which was also one of the 7 great families. These 7 great families each had a powerful bloodline power, such as the Ming clan's Raging Flame Crystal and the Su clan's Golden Dragon Punisher. As for the Tai clan's bloodline power, it was the Cold Iron Body. Rumor has it that the Tai clan martial artists with the bloodline power could transform their martial body into cold iron, instantly increasing the strength of their martial body by several times or even dozens of times. The Tai clan martial artists who activated the Cold Iron Body were equivalent to strengthening their martial body by several times. It was very terrifying. It's actually Tai Zhong. When Su Kuanga saw the Tai clan martial artist, his eyes could not help but sink and his expression changed slightly. Tai Zhong was very famous in the Tai clan. He was a genius of the Tai clan's younger generation. Sir Su, Is this person very powerful? Will he be a threat to teacher? Duanmu Lu saw Su Kuanga's reaction and could not help but frown and asked nervously. No, he is not Nie Tian's opponent. Su Kuanga nodded slightly and said lightly. Although Tai Zhong was powerful, compared to a genius like Nine Wolf, he was still lacking. Nie Tian could even defeat Su Kuanga, so Tai Zhong naturally could not threaten him. However, in Su Kuanga's view, if Nie Tian wanted to defeat Tai Zhong, he must use his true strength. Even though Nie Tian had already won 60 battles in a row, he was still far from being able to defeat the Heavenly Wolf. The further they went, the more intense the battle became. Nie Tian's premature exposure was not a good thing for him. People from the Tai clan, I hope you can make Nie Tian use his true strength. At this moment, Su Qing looked at the stage from afar and thought to himself. After Nie Tian stepped onto the martial stage, the strength he displayed shocked him. When Wenren Xiang looked for him, she told him that Nie Tian had defeated Su Kuanga. At the time, Su Qing didn't believe it. But now, he felt that Wenren Xiang wasn't lying. Even he couldn't tell exactly how powerful Nie Tian's battle prowess was. He knew that Tai Zhong was not a match for Nie Tian. At most, he could force Nie Tian to use his true strength. I am Tai Zhong. Thank you for your guidance. At this moment, Tai Zhong spoke coldly on the martial stage. His entire body's aura was crazily released. Instantly, the entire martial stage shook as if it was going to collapse. Nie Tian. Nie Tian responded with a faint smile. Finally, a decent opponent came. But facing Tai Zhong, he was not afraid in the slightest. He even felt that although Tai Zhong looked stupid, his strength was enough, but his speed was very slow. I'm going to attack. In the next moment, Tai Zhong let out a low roar and punched out. Instantly, a black fist shadow appeared in the air, pressing down on Nie Tian like a mountain. The surrounding space immediately stagnated, as if it had been sealed by a terrifying force. Amen. Nie Tian felt a strange fluctuation of aura. He couldn't help but frown and his expression slightly changed. He felt that when Tai Zhong's fist landed, it released a spirit formation power that sealed the surrounding space, making it impossible for him to dodge. It seemed that his previous worry was unnecessary. Tai Zhong's space-sealing power perfectly made up for his lack of speed. Good timing. Then, Nie Tian smiled faintly. The corner of his mouth pulled into a faint curve. His aura surged crazily as he threw a punch at Tai Zhong. Bang! In the next moment, the two fists collided, and a muffled explosion erupted in the sky while the entire arena shook along with it. Then, Nie Tian and Tai Zhong's figures retreated at the same time. However, Nie Tian only retreated a few meters while Tai Zhong retreated dozens of meters. How is this possible? The scene on the martial stage made everyone's eyes tremble as they exclaimed. It was unbelievable that Nie Tian dared to directly compete with Tai Zhong's strength. The result was that Nie Tian's martial body was even stronger. The most terrifying thing about the Tai family's frost iron body was that it could increase the strength of the martial body. Although Tai Zhong didn't activate the frost iron body, his martial body was far stronger than warriors of the same level. Tai Zhong was a warrior at the 8th level of Heaven Essence, but his martial body was comparable to a Heavenly Mandate Realm warrior. Nie Tian was only at the 2nd level of Heaven Essence, but he was able to defeat Tai Zhong with one punch. Could it be that his martial body was stronger than a Heavenly Mandate Realm warrior? This was unbelievable. Nie Tian's martial body was even stronger than a fierce beast. How can your martial body be so strong? Tai Zhong stabilized his body and looked at Nie Tian in shock. The shock in his heart was written on his face. You're not weak either. Nie Tian responded with a faint smile. Tai Zhong didn't know that the most terrifying thing about Nie Tian was his martial body. Nie Tian's martial body had been strengthened countless times. The power of 900 billion stars, the 9 supreme dragon veins, the supreme demonic fire, the power of heaven's punishment, the shackles of the heavenly Tao, and the power of gods and demons were perfectly integrated into his martial body, creating his powerful martial body. At this time, even without any defense, Nie Tian's martial body was comparable to a low-level heavenly mandate realm warrior. Although Tai Zhong's martial body was strong, it was still weaker than Nie Tian's. "I don't believe that you're really that strong." Tai Zhong growled cold and punched again. Boom! Nie Tian still didn't dodge and punched out. There was a muffled sound in the air, and Tai Zhong was sent flying. After he stabilized his body, blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. This! Everyone's eyes darkened and they gasped. Nie Tian's punch actually injured Tai Zhong. Damn it! Tai Zhong was completely infuriated. He roared and a terrible power surged out of his body. Then, a strange change appeared on his body. His skin turned black and exuded an extreme chill. It was as if his whole body had turned into frost iron. Frost iron body! Seeing this scene, everyone's expression changed and they exclaimed. This was the frost iron body of the Tai family. Tai Zhong was completely enraged and directly activated the frost iron body. The aura of his body skyrocketed several times. The eyes of the crowd were burning. They wanted to see if Tai Zhong, who had activated the frost iron body, was a match for Nie Tian. "Kid, you're dead." Tai Zhong growled, and like a wild beast, he took a step forward and rushed toward Nie Tian. One sword. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. Starlight Heaven Slash appeared in his hand. Then, he said lightly, the long sword slashed through the air and a sword shadow whistled out, attacking Tai Zhong. Tai Zhong's eyes trembled as he exclaimed in shock. He actually felt an intense threat. Boom! In the next moment, he didn't have time to react. The sword shadow fell directly. There was a muffled sound in the air and his figure flew backward. While he was still in the air, his frost iron body was directly broken. When he landed, his body was covered in blood. He was so seriously injured that he couldn't even stand. Nie Tian finally used his sword. Chapter 35-33. 7 cultivators of true virtue were shaken. Chapter 35-28. Killing intent, hiss. The entire audience gasped. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the arena. There was dead silence, and no sound could be heard for a long time. The crowd could not believe their eyes. What they had just seen. Tai Zhong, who had activated his frost iron body, was actually defeated by Nie Tian's sword. This was the first time that Nie Tian had used his sword, and it had brought such a big shock to everyone. It seemed that the Tai family's frost iron body was completely vulnerable in front of Nie Tian. Just how strong was Nie Tian's sword intent? The crowd's eyes trembled, and they couldn't react for a long time. How could this be? After a long time, Tai Zhong's eyes trembled, and he cried out in shock. He looked at Nie Tian with fear in his eyes, and he even subconsciously retreated. His whole body was dripping with blood, and beads of sweat oozed from his forehead. He originally thought that after activating his frost iron body, he would definitely be able to defeat Nie Tian with one punch. But the fact was that Nie Tian had seriously injured him with one sword. Moreover, he knew that Nie Tian hadn't used his full strength. Otherwise, he wouldn't be standing. Nie Tian looked at Tai Zhong and said with a faint smile, "Frost iron body is not bad. Unfortunately, my sword is sharper." If he wanted to, he could have directly killed Tai Zhong with that sword. However, his heart softened, and seeing that it wasn't easy for Tai Zhong to cultivate, he spared his life. Nie Tian's indifferent voice was filled with undisguised arrogance. Standing in the arena, Nie Tian was like a sharp sword that shone with dazzling light. Tai Zhong looked at Nie Tian and finally regained some of his calmness. He bowed slightly and said, "Thank you for showing mercy." The corner of Nie Tian's mouth curled up, and he just nodded without saying anything. Tai Zhong's figure moved, and he left the arena. Immediately, the entire wolf-slave arena was in an uproar. Although Nye Tian had won 60 battles in a row, none of his opponents were truly amazing. Although there were 9th-level Heavenly Charm martial artists, their combat strength was mediocre. Tai Zhong, on the other hand, was different. With the title of Tai Clan's genius, Tai Zhong's battle prowess was terrifying. However, in front of Nye Tian, he was powerless. The crowd looked at Nye Tian and couldn't help but start discussing. Who is this kid? How can he be so terrifying? Yeah. Tai Zhong is a genius cultivator of the Tai clan. Even if he is not as monstrous as Jiulang, he is definitely not much weaker. Yet, he was actually defeated by this brat with a single sword strike. This is unbelievable. Could it be that this kid's battle prowess is already comparable to the 9 wolf warriors? He's only at the 2nd stage of Heavenly Rhythm. If he was at the 9th stage of Heavenly Rhythm, wouldn't he be able to defeat the Heavenly Wolf? As the crowd spoke, they looked at Nye Tian with even more fear. Nye Tian looked at the crowd with a calm expression, neither arrogant nor rash. At this time, he had won 61 battles in a row and had been standing on the stage for nearly 2 days. However, he knew that the next battle would be the real challenge. The people who appeared before him, including Tai Zhong, were no threat to him. The challengers behind him would only get stronger and stronger. I'll bet 1,000 top-quality Saint Crystals on the Heavenly Wolf. At this time, someone raised the Heavenly Wolf bet again. Following that, more and more people raised the Heavenly Wolf bet. Although the money and items would be gone after the bet, it was worth it to attract stronger opponents and let them see more exciting battles. I'll bet 700 top-quality Saint Crystals. I'll bet a rank 2 Sacred Array Scroll. I'll bet a rank 3 Sacred Artifact. Everyone raised the Heavenly Wolf bet one after another. The entire wolf-slave field seemed to have gone crazy as they kept raising the stakes. At this moment, everything that happened here was quietly transmitted to the outside world. At this time, in one of the 2 main cities of the 7th Sacred Cultivator world, the largest restaurant in Moon City, people were discussing intensely, and what they were talking about was exactly what had happened in the wolf-slave market. Did you guys hear? Someone is challenging the Heavenly Wolf in the wolf-slave field. The news has already spread. That Heavenly Wolf brat seems to be at the 2nd stage of Heavenly Charm and has already won more than 60 battles in a row. How can a 2nd stage Heavenly Charm win more than 60 battles? Are all his opponents at the 1st stage of Heavenly Charm? His opponents are very strong. There are many high-rank Heavenly Charm cultivators. However, that brat's strength is very strange. Even rank 8 and rank 9 Heavenly Charm cultivators were easily defeated by him. So powerful? That brat's talent is a bit abnormal. Who said it wasn't? I heard that the Heavenly Wolf bet has already reached millions of top-quality Saint Crystals. There are also countless sacred cores, sacred pills, sacred artifacts, sacred arrays, etc. If that brat wins, I'm afraid his wealth is comparable to a small chamber of commerce. What's that brat's name? He can't be a peerless genius from a high-rank sacred world, right? I think he's called Nye Tian. His origin is unknown. Nye Tian. Everyone said and remembered this name. In just half a day, Nye Tian's name spread throughout the 7th sacred world of cultivators along with the matter of the Heavenly Wolf. As a result, the 7th sacred world of cultivators was completely shaken. Many big forces, sects, gangs, clans, and even some dark forces heard the news and came to the wolf-slave field. At this time, the wolf-slave field was already filled with people. There were at least hundreds of thousands of people. I'm afraid the entire 7th sacred world of cultivators has been alarmed by a single heavenly wolf. Nye Tian looked at the crowd and couldn't help but frown as he bitterly smiled in his heart. He didn't think that things would develop to this point. At this time, his opponent was not just Wolf Knight Mountain but the entire 7th sacred world of cultivators. At the same time, evil Moon Wolf's people were also alarmed. Two Wolf King powerhouses appeared to hold the line with Su Cheng to prevent any trouble. At this time, Nie Tian had already won 70 battles in a row and was waiting for his next opponent to appear. Everyone, the Heavenly Wolf will pause for a moment. I have something to say to everyone. But at this time, Su Cheng's figure appeared in the sky above the arena. He stood there like a mountain as his eyes swept across the audience, and he loudly said, I'm sure everyone is clear about the rules of the Sky Wolf Challenge. Everyone who enters the arena is doing so voluntarily. If anything goes wrong, the Wolf Slave Field will have nothing to do with it. Of course. Lord Wolf King, please continue to challenge the Heavenly Wolf. The crowd responded loudly, clearly impatient. Su Cheng smiled slightly and waved his hand, indicating for the Heavenly Wolf to continue. At this time, most of the people who came to the Wolf Slave Field were people from big forces. If these people entered the arena and were killed by Nie Tian, they would have to bear the consequences themselves. It would have nothing to do with the Wolf Slave Field. Su Cheng's words were not only to clear the responsibility of the Wolf Slave Field in advance, but also to remind everyone to be cautious when challenging others. Nie Tian, how much longer can you last? Su Cheng looked at Nie Tian and frowned. Then, his figure moved and returned to the distance. The development of the Heavenly Wolf had exceeded his expectations. The seventh sacred world of cultivators was shaken, which was extremely disadvantageous to Nie Tian. Su Cheng didn't think that Nie Tian could last until the end. Just as Su Cheng opened the martial stage, a ghost-like figure appeared on the martial stage without anyone noticing. Chapter 35-34. The head of the soul-severing sect in the martial stage. After that person appeared, the surrounding space was immediately filled with a terrifying killing intent. The terrifying aura caused people to suffocate. What a terrifying aura! The crowd outside the stage also sensed the intense murderous aura. Their eyes couldn't help but tremble as they cried out, "An assassin!" Su Cheng's expression darkened as he looked at that cultivator from afar. That person wasn't very strong, only in the 8th level of heaven rhythm. However, he was able to release such a terrifying murderous aura, which meant that he was a professional assassin. You're an assassin. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he looked at that person. Brat, you're very smart. That person sneered. His eyes surged with intense murderous intent. But unfortunately, smart people don't live long. Is that so? Nie Tianling replied with a smile. You think you can kill me with a barrier? That person's eyes trembled when he heard Nie Tian's words. He was clearly very surprised. He didn't expect Nie Tian to be able to tell that it was a barrier. You're not weak and your murderous aura is also very strong. However, it's impossible for you to release such a powerful murderous aura. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, however, it's not bad that you were able to fuse your killing intent into your ward and create such a deterrent ward. That person's expression suddenly tensed up as he looked at Nie Tian. Nie Tian had actually seen through his technique in an instant. The barrier he created was indeed formed from the fusion of murderous aura. It was a great deterrent to cultivators. Ordinary martial artists, when faced with such a strong killing intent, would naturally be afraid before the battle even began. But Nie Tian wasn't affected in the slightest. Brat, it seems that I've underestimated you. In the next moment, that person calmed down and faintly smiled. But that doesn't change anything. You will still die. Make your move. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth curled up into a smile. The starlight heavenly slash in his hand trembled, and a sword cry rang out, sweeping away the barrier's power. Kill. At this time, that person let out a low roar and struck out with his palm. Instantly, a violent energy condensed in the air, forming a killing storm. Like a wild beast, it smashed towards Nie Tian. Boom! The strangulation storm combined with the power of the spirit formation erupted with a frightening sealing power, causing Nie Tian to feel as if he had entered a cage. Nie Tian's eyebrows furrowed slightly as he was inwardly surprised. The fact that this person was able to perfectly fuse his attacks with the power of the spirit formation was truly frightening. Stimulated by his attack, his spirit power sealed off the surrounding space, making it impossible for those who were attacked to dodge. They could only take the attack head-on. Moreover, this kind of attack would cause great pressure to the martial artists, and the deterrence was very strong. "Stinking brat, you're no match for me. Obediently accept your death." In the sky, that person laughed sinisterly. His eyes flashed with a cold light, like a venomous wolf in the night, incomparably austere. Boom! Nietian didn't say anything. His body shook, and instantly, an enormous sword aura soared into the sky. The space suddenly trembled, and it actually forcibly broke through the sealed space. Sacred heaven-defying sword, human sword slashes stars. In the next moment, the corner of Nietian's mouth curled up into a cold smile. Immediately, on the starry heaven slash, the sword light shone brightly, extremely dazzling, and a sharp aura filled the entire martial arts arena. So powerful! At this moment, the crowd felt the sword intent ripple in the air. Their eyes couldn't help but violently tremble, and they cried out in shock. It seemed that only now did Nietian reveal the astonishing power of his sword intent. Rumble! Bang bang bang! At this moment, a swift and fierce sword shadow whizzed out and bombarded the strangulation storm. After the void trembled for a moment, the strangulation storm was actually forcefully torn apart, collapsed, and exploded in the air. How is this possible? Seeing this scene, that person's eyes trembled, and he shouted in shock. In the next moment, he felt a terrifying power pressing down on him, and the fear on his face reached the extreme. Even in his dreams, he didn't expect Nietian's strength to be so terrifying. But at this moment it was all too late. In the blink of an eye, the sword shadow fell, and that person's figure directly turned into a bloody light, and the smell of blood filled the martial arts arena. The shocking scene caused everyone's eyes to tremble, and they simultaneously gasped. They felt that even their tailbones were ice-cold, and their gazes towards Nietian were filled with fear. Who would have thought that Nietian would be able to kill that assassin with a single swing of his sword? Why was Nietian's sword intent so terrifying? Your spirit formation and your killing intent are merely a bluff. An assassin like you should be proficient in assassination, not direct confrontation. Standing on the martial arts arena, Nietian said with a faint smile. This assassin gave off an extremely powerful feeling when he first stepped onto the martial arts arena. Unfortunately, he was only an empty shell. His spirit formation and killing intent were more frightening than anything else. However, Nietian was not afraid at all. At least when facing an 8th-layer heaven rhythm martial artist, Nietian wouldn't feel any fear. The eyes of the crowd trembled, and they were once again shocked by Nietian's strength. "Brat, how dare you kill him?" At this moment, a deep voice suddenly resounded in the air, like a sudden clap of thunder. The crowd was startled at the same time, and when they looked towards the source of the voice, they saw a black-robed martial artist standing in the air, emitting a chilling aura, like a 10,000-year-old iceberg. Instantly, the entire martial arts arena was shrouded by a terrifying killing intent. Nietian frowned, and his expression changed slightly. This time, it was real killing intent, without the help of any other power. The black-robed martial artist's strength was far stronger than the assassin's. The appearance of this black-robed martial artist was clearly to kill Nietian. "Sect Master of the Absolute Soul Sect, are you going to intervene?" At this moment, another voice sounded. Su Cheng's figure appeared in the air, confronting the black-robed martial artist. When the crowd heard Su Cheng address the black-robed martial artist, their eyes trembled and they exclaimed, "Sect Master of the Absolute Soul Sect." So this black-robed martial artist was actually the sect master of the Absolute Soul Sect. The Absolute Soul Sect was the largest assassin organization in the 7th sacred world of cultivators. They were mysterious and unfathomable, and they killed people for money. Who would have thought that even the sect master of the Absolute Soul sect would personally come for this small sky wolf challenge? Actually, it wasn't strange. The Absolute Soul sect killed people for money, and the Sky Wolf challenge this time was so high that it was enough to tempt the Absolute Soul sect. The sect master of the Absolute Soul sect's eyes were like the abyss, flashing with a cold light as he coldly said, "He killed my disciple." This Wolf King has already said that the rules of the Sky Wolf challenge are that both parties are willing to die. Even if that person is your disciple, you can't break the rules of the Sky Wolf challenge. Su Qing coldly replied, very domineering. Humph. The sect master of the Absolute Soul sect laughed coldly. He suddenly took a step forward and said coldly, "Does your evil Moon Wolf sect want to become enemies with the Absolute Soul sect for a wolf slave?" He didn't know Nie Tian's identity, and treated Nie Tian as a wolf slave. Chapter 35-35. Victory! Boom! In the sky above the arena, two terrifying auras collided. There was a muffled sound as if two mountains had collided. Then, Su Qing and the soul-severing sect master's figures swayed at the same time before stabilizing. Are these two going to fight? The crowd's eyes trembled violently as they shouted in surprise. They were clearly very excited. One of the two people in the sky was the Wolf King of the demonic Moon Wolf tribe, and the other was the soul-severing sect master. If they fought, it would be very exciting. At this moment, the soul-severing sect master's eyes were filled with killing intent. He looked at Su Qing coldly and did not speak. Soul-severing sect master, this is the wolf slave field. It's not your turn to be arrogant. In the next moment, another voice sounded. Then, two figures descended and landed beside Su Qing. They were the other two wolf kings of the wolf slave field. 3 wolf kings appearing at the same time was definitely a very rare sight in the Wolf Night Mountain. The soul-severing sect master looked at the 3 of them with an extremely gloomy expression. If it was just Su Qing alone, he might have a chance of winning. However, facing 3 wolf kings at the same time, he had no chance of winning. Soul-severing sect master, please leave this place. The wolf slave field does not welcome you. Su Qing's expression darkened as he growled and stepped forward with an imposing manner. Good. Very good. The soul-severing sect master's expression darkened. He suddenly laughed wildly and said loudly, "I will remember what happened today." After saying that, he did not stop. His figure moved like a ghost and disappeared in an instant. Su Qing's gaze trembled slightly as he sensed the surrounding void. After confirming that the soul-severing sect master had left, he heaved a sigh of relief. Then, his gaze swept across the crowd and he said, "Sky Picking Wolf, continue." The crowd trembled and their faces became a little more nervous. What had just happened seemed to have nothing to do with them, but in fact, it made them understand one thing. Everyone who challenged Nie Tian had to be prepared for the worst. At least until the Sky Picking Wolf was over, the people of the demonic Moonwolf sect would protect Nie Tian. Everyone knew that rather than saying that the demonic Moonwolf sect was protecting Nie Tian, it was more accurate to say that the demonic Moonwolf sect was protecting the wolf slave field. Evil Moon Tianlang had even offended the soul-severing sect. In that case, everyone who wanted to challenge him would have to consider it carefully. Then, the entire wolf slave field was silent for a long time. No one dared to step onto the stage. Nie Tian had even killed an assassin from the soul-severing sect. This was quite a shock to everyone. Following that, the stakes kept piling up. Finally, someone couldn't resist the temptation and started to play. However, although there was no lack of genius martial artists, all of them were defeated by Nie Tian. A day later, Nie Tian won another 20 rounds, accumulating a total of 95 rounds. At this moment, he only needed to win 5 more matches to take down the Sky Picking Wolf. At this moment, the Heavenly Wolf bet had reached a shocking number. More than 30 million top-grade Saint Crystals, tens of thousands of Saint cores, Saint pills, Saint artifacts, Saint arrays, and other unexpected things. However, at this moment, no one continued to bet on Gao Tianlang. Everyone knew that the current serious bet was terrifying enough to tempt the hearts of martial artists. There was no point in continuing to bet on Gao Tianlang. The next 5 matches would be crucial. If Nie Tian could hold on, he would create a miracle. After nearly 4 days and 95 battles, Nie Tian's condition was very good. He was still at his peak, as if the previous battles were just games to him. He didn't even use up any energy. At this moment, everyone looked at Nie Tian and couldn't help but discuss. This kid called Nie Tian is too strong. He defeated so many high-level heavenly rhythm cultivators with his second layer, heavenly rhythm cultivation. How terrifying! I suspect that he's a descendant of a big family from a high-rank holy world. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so strong. Forget it. If he was a descendant of a big family, would he need to challenge the sky-picking wolf? I wonder what the next battle will be like. Who will be able to defeat him? As everyone discussed, they stared at Nie Tian without blinking, as if they were worried that the latter would suddenly run away. In a distant corner, Shun Han stared at Nie Tian with a blank expression on his face. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined that Nie Tian would make it this far. Only now did he truly understand how terrifying Nie Tian was. At this moment, Nie Tian seemed to be a little anxious. He swept his gaze across the crowd and said loudly, "There are still 5 matches left. Who will fight next?" As soon as his voice fell, the response was dead silence. After witnessing his strength, no one dared to go up blindly. Most importantly, until now, Nie Tian hadn't been injured, so he hadn't revealed his true strength. No one knew how strong he was. "Is there no one?" Nie Tianling sneered and said provocatively, "There's still 1 more day. Do you want me to stand on the arena for the whole day?" This kid is too arrogant. The crowd frowned, their faces were very ugly, and they all angrily rebuked. But they could only angrily rebuke, they didn't dare to go up. Nie Tian was very arrogant, but he had the capital to be arrogant. Nie Tian, right? Let me experience just how strong you are. At this moment, a low voice sounded out, and then an unfamiliar figure appeared on the arena. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Nie Tian with an incomparably gloomy expression. "It's you!" When Nie Tian saw that person, his eyes slightly narrowed, and then the corner of his mouth twitched. He lightly called out the opponent's name, Yin Liujie. At this time, the person who appeared on the arena was none other than Yin Liujie, one of the 9 wolves like Su Kuanga. Previously, in the restaurant, Nie Tian had a conflict with Yin Liujie. If Su Kuanga and Su Qing hadn't appeared, the two would have had a big fight. And at that time, Yin Liujie wanted to kill Nie Tian. He had come to the wolf slave field before, but he didn't make a move. Nie Tian's performance shocked him. He wanted to watch a few more matches to thoroughly understand Nie Tian. But at this moment, no one challenged him, so he couldn't wait any longer and personally went up to fight. Yin Liujie. He is Yin Liujie of the 7 Wolves Mercenary Corps. Everyone looked at Yin Liujie, their eyes trembled violently, blazing and excited. After the 95th match, a truly powerful genius finally appeared, one of the 9 wolves of Wolf Night, Yin Liujie. The appearance of Yin Liujie caused the audience to boil. After all, Yin Liujie was one of the 9 wolves, the top genius of Wolf's Night Mountain, and he had cultivated the 7 Wolves Mercenary Group's signature martial art, 7 Wolves Final Kill. If he attacked, Nie Tian would be in danger. Chapter 35-36. Chapter 351. Chapter 351 Battle in 6 Tribulations. The black-clothed martial artist's face was gloomy and his wolf-like eyes locked onto Nie Tian. He seemed to have determined that Nie Tian would definitely lose. His aura was very strange. Although it was extremely restrained, it gave people an unfathomable feeling, as if his whole person was like an endless ocean. Not far from the black-clothed martial artist, Su Qing stood coldly. When Su Qing heard the words of the black-clothed martial artist, the corner of his mouth twitched, and he said indifferently, "Leader Huang Lang, the two of them haven't fought yet, isn't it a bit too early for you to come to a conclusion?" This black-clothed martial artist had an extremely high status in Wolf's Night Mountain. He was the leader of the Seven Wolves Mercenary Corps. Moreover, he was also the teacher of Enliojie. Very few people knew his specific name. He was called Huang Lang. Even Su Qing, in front of Huang Lang, did not dare to show too high of a posture, but spoke in an equal tone. "Humph!" Huang Lang glanced at Su Qing, sneered twice, and said, "It seems that Wolf King Su is very confident in this kid. With the strength that Nie Tian has shown, is there a need for me to have confidence in him?" Su Qing smiled faintly, seemingly responding casually, but in fact, it showed that he had more confidence in Nie Tian. "Humph, let's wait and see." Huang Lang sneered, his eyes locked on the battle stage. "Nie Tian, I'm really surprised that you can persist until now. But your path of challenging the Heavenly Wolf ends here." Enliojie's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he said coldly, "But your path of challenging the Heavenly Wolf ends here. Is that so?" The corner of Nie Tian's mouth slightly raised, a playful look on his face. Enliojie's aura was indeed a lot more tyrannical than the previous people, and for him to be on par with someone like Su Kuanga, his strength was certainly not weak. However, Nie Tian was not afraid. He could defeat Su Kuanga, so he could also defeat Enliojie. "Nie Tian, I admire your confidence," Enliojie said coldly and smiled. "Unfortunately, no matter how great your confidence is, in the face of absolute power, it is vulnerable." Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward, and his aura surged out madly. It was as if a mountain was collapsing, and the entire arena was enveloped by an enormous force that rumbled incessantly. So strong. Everyone's eyes trembled, and they couldn't help but exclaim. Enliojie was indeed extraordinary. The aura that erupted in an instant was already so terrifying. Kill. In the next moment, Enliojie let out a low roar, and the aura of his whole body suddenly skyrocketed to the extreme. Then, he struck out with his palm, and a terrifying dark wolf claw appeared. It was dark and sharp, as if to tear everything apart. The surrounding void suddenly sank, and it suppressed towards Nie Tian. "It's over." Seeing this scene, Huang Lang smiled faintly. He was extremely confident. As far as he was concerned, as long as that wolf claw descended, everything would be settled, and Nie Tian would die without a doubt. With Enliojie's ruthlessness, even if this wolf claw fell on a low-level Heavenly Mandate Realm warrior, he would still end up with nothing left. Nie Tian's mere second-level Heavenly Yun strength could not withstand it at all. Huh! When Su Qing saw this scene, his eyes suddenly tightened, and he was obviously very nervous. He didn't expect Enliojie's strength to be so terrifying. Even he could feel a slight pressure coming from it. Everyone's eyes also shrank, as if they had already seen the scene of Nie Tian being killed. Boom! But at this moment, a low rumbling sound rang out in the air. After that, a sword shadow whistled through the air, akin to the raging waves of the ocean. Its surging momentum shook the heavens and earth. Instantly, a muffled sound rang out in the air. That wolf claw of darkness was actually forcefully shattered. Huh! The sudden scene made Enliojie's eyes sink, and he exclaimed in surprise. However, what followed was a terrifying pressure that forced him to retreat hundreds of meters away. When he stabilized his figure, he saw a silver-haired figure standing in the void, like a sharp unsheathed sword, with unparalleled sharpness. How is this possible? Enliojie's eyes trembled, and he let out a strange cry, obviously extremely shocked. At the same time, the smile on Huang Lang's face stopped abruptly, and his face froze. His whole body seemed to have been petrified, and he didn't react for a long time. He never thought that Nie Tian could actually block Enliojie's palm, and even forced Enliojie to retreat. How was this possible? Nie Tian clearly didn't have such powerful strength before. Then, Huang Lang suddenly discovered something, and his pupils shrank in horror, as if he had seen a ghost. He took a deep breath and his face froze again. He couldn't believe that the sword momentum of Nie Tian's body had actually skyrocketed, and it had skyrocketed by more than several times. The realm of Nie Tian's sword Dao had actually improved. But how was this possible? Nie Tian was clearly at the first level of sword rhyme just now. How could he break through to the 5th level in the blink of an eye? Even if Nie Tian could break through, he could at most break through 1 level. How could he suddenly advance by 4 levels? Just what was going on? What kind of terrifying power was in Nie Tian's body? Su Cheng's face wasn't much better than Huang Lang's, and he was equally shocked. Even powerhouses like them had never seen someone who could instantly improve the realm of sword Dao. The crowd looked at Nie Tian, and they were all stunned, unable to react for a long time. Only now did they realize that they had underestimated Nie Tian. How could your realm be? On the arena, Enliojie looked at Nie Tian, his eyes trembling, obviously too shocked. He was the closest to Nie Tian, so he could feel the changes in Nie Tian's sword momentum and sword intent the most vividly. Nie Tian's sword momentum skyrocketed by several times in almost an instant, which was too terrifying. Enliojie, do you still have the confidence you had just now? Nie Tian looked at Enliojie and smiled faintly, appearing very provocative. Insolence. Enliojie's eyes darkened, and he immediately calmed down. With a low roar, his whole body's aura was released crazily, and a terrifying force, like a storm, circulated outside his body, surging violently. Come on. Nie Tian smiled faintly, without the slightest fear, and his eyes were full of fighting spirit. He also wanted to test how strong his current strength was through Enliojie's hands. Ice Wolf, kill! Right at this moment, Enliojie let out a furious roar, and all the power in his body instantly burst forth. Waves of terrifying power actually carried a frigid aura and rolled out like a tsunami. Suddenly, a giant white wolf appeared in the air. It looked as if it was carved out of ice, and exuded a bone-chilling aura as it fiercely pounced towards Nie Tian. Ice attribute power, a little interesting. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he smiled faintly. Starlight heavenly slash streaked across the sky, and the sword light shot out tens of thousands of meters away, and a sword shadow cut through the void, killing the ice wolf. Flame wolf, kill! At that moment, Enliojie let out another bellow, and the frost power he was wreathed in turned into flames in the blink of an eye, burning the void. Immediately afterwards, a huge crimson wolf pounced towards Nie Tian like a ball of fire. The sudden change made Nie Tian's eyes narrow, and he was surprised. Chapter 35-37. Roar! 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 On the arena, Enliojie's ice wolf and flame wolf attacked at the same time. The two giant wolves roared like thunder and burst out with the power of ice and fire in the air, pouncing at Nie Tian. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. Enliojie's means were beyond his expectations, and caught him off guard. 8 Desolation Sword! But in the next moment, he regained his composure and roared. The sword intent in his body surged out like a stormy sea. On the starry heavenly slash, the sword light shone brightly, and a terrifying sword shadow let out a sword cry, like an enraged wild beast, and rushed out. Boom! In the next moment, the domineering sword fell and collided with the two giant wolves at the same time. There was a muffled sound in the void, and the space suddenly sank as if it was about to collapse. So strong! Seeing the scene on the arena, everyone's eyes trembled and they exclaimed. Nie Tian's sword was incomparably powerful and actually blocked the ice and fire wolves at the same time. This kid's sword intent is terrifying. Huang Lang looked at Nie Tian and felt the fluctuation of sword intent coming from the void. His eyes trembled slightly and his heart was filled with shock. Even if he couldn't wait for Nie Tian to be directly killed by Liujie, he had to admit that Nie Tian's sword intent was indeed very terrifying. There was a sharpness in the majesty, and every sword strike seemed to tear the void. Boom! Bang bang bang! At this moment, a violent explosion sounded. The sword shadow and the ice and fire wolves collapsed at the same time, turning into endless violent force that rushed in all directions. Immediately, the figures of Nie Tian and Liujie burst back at the same time and directly retreated to the edge of the arena. Liujie steadied his body and exclaimed in surprise. He looked at Nie Tian with a pair of incomparably vicious eyes and said coldly, Nie Tian, you can actually resist my twin wolves. It seems that I have underestimated you. If that's all you have, then I'll have overestimated you. Nie Tian smiled faintly, his calmness carrying an undisguised sarcasm. Liujie's ice and fire wolves were indeed very strong. In an instant, they erupted, causing the opponent to suffer the coldness of ice and the blazing fire at the same time. It was as if they were in a land of ice and fire. It was a great blow to a martial artist's martial body. However, Nie Tian was not afraid. Just the power of ice and fire could not harm his martial body. However, he knew that Liujie hadn't used his true power yet. If it was only the ice and fire twin wolves, Liujie was not qualified to stand side by side with Su Kuanga. Nie Tian, you've angered me. Liujie let out a low roar, completely enraged, and the aura of his whole body once again soared wildly. The aura of the dual attributes of ice and fire separated in an extremely strange manner, surrounding his body like a storm of ice and fire, filling the surrounding space with an extremely terrifying strangling power, as if to grind everything. His aura is even stronger now. Nie Tian felt waves of ice blades and waves of fire rushing toward his face, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble slightly. Liujie's strength was really not weak. This kind of terrible power of ice and fire, even a heavenly mandate realm expert would not be able to withstand it calmly. Go to hell! Liujie roared like thunder, and the aura of his whole body was released wildly in an instant. Suddenly, the ice wolf and the fire wolf appeared at the same time. The aura was even more powerful than before, hitting the void, extremely terrifying. Boom! Boom! The two giant wolves of ice and fire, like two giant mountains, pounced on Nie Tian. The amazing aura seemed to be able to crush the world. Nie Tian frowned and was surprised that Liujie could use the power of ice and fire at the same time. Moreover, when the two forces were combined, there was no conflict at all. Instead, they stimulated each other and burst out with a stronger power. It had to be said that Liujie's control of power was indeed very terrifying. 9 limits of starry sky, heavenly slash. The next moment, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and the starry heavenly slash crossed the void. The sword intent was like a dazzling waterfall released, and the sword shadow was like a mountain blasting toward the two giant wolves. Boom! Boom! Chi chi chi! In the void, the extreme powers collided. Time and space trembled and the sky changed color. Terrifying rumbling sounds rang out. Endless wild power was like a raging wave that covered the sky, wreaking havoc in the void as if it wanted to destroy the world. Nie Tian and Liujie both retreated almost at the same time and were once again forced to the edge of the arena. After the two stabilized their figures, they looked at each other, but their expressions were completely different. Nie Tian looked indifferent, while Liujie was murderous as if he wanted to eat someone. Moreover, Nie Tian was safe and sound, but Liujie was injured with blood spilling from the corner of his mouth. Liujie is injured. When everyone saw this scene, they couldn't help but tremble and exclaim. No one expected that Liujie would be injured. Originally, everyone thought that with Liujie's strength, Nie Tian would be unable to resist. But the fact was that Nie Tian was not at a disadvantage in the confrontation with Liujie. This kid, what a strong martial body. Outside the arena, Huang Lang's eyes flickered, staring at Nie Tian with a horrified expression. He could see that the strength of Nie Tian and Yin Liujie was almost the same, but Nie Tian's martial body was stronger than Yin Liujie's. Therefore, under the impact of the same power, Nie Tian could be safe and sound, while Yin Liujie was injured. Off to the side, Su Cheng's eyes flickered with excitement and astonishment as he asked, Nie Tian, what's your limit? Although he had confidence in Nie Tian, he didn't expect Nie Tian to be so terrifying. The other two wolf kings next to him trembled, they were even more shocked than him. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they really couldn't believe that a second-level heaven rhythm warrior could be so terrifying. Nie Tian, I'm not as good as you. On the other side, Su Kuanga looked at Nie Tian with trembling eyes, unable to hide the sadness on his face, and said in a heavy heart. He could see that Nie Tian was even more terrifying than when he fought with him before. He knew that Nie Tian's true strength had not been revealed yet. At this time, he was truly convinced and admitted that he was not as good as Nie Tian. He was one of the 9 wolves, the peak genius of Wolf's Night Mountain. He had a proud temperament. At this time, he admitted that he was not as good as Nie Tian, which showed how terrifying Nie Tian was. Yin Liujie, is that all your strength? At this time, Nie Tian's voice sounded calm and indifferent, but it was extremely harsh in Yin Liujie's ears. Damn it! Yin Liujie growled, and his whole body's aura burst out like a stormy sea. Suddenly, a shocking aura circulated around his body. That terrifying aura seemed to be able to devour the heavens and earth. Come on, let me see your strongest power. Feeling Yin Liujie's aura, the corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched slightly, and there was a trace of excitement in his eyes. The stronger Yin Liujie was, the happier he was. Only a strong opponent was qualified to make him use his true strength. When Yin Liujie's eyes were filled with murderous intent as he spoke sinisterly. Suddenly, a sharp aura of wind gushed out from his body and whistled through the air, making him look like a huge storm. Seeing this scene, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he was surprised. Chapter 35-38. It ends here. The third kind of power. Nie Tian felt the fluctuation of power in the void. His eyes trembled slightly and he was surprised. He didn't expect that Yin Liujie could use a third kind of power in addition to ice and fire. This person's understanding and control of power was really terrifying. Nie Tian, you can block my 2 wolves, but can you block my 3 wolves? In midair, Yin Liujie's whole body was full of killing intent. He said coldly, and suddenly 3 forces appeared in the void at the same time. One was ice, one was flame, and one was a storm. Ice wolf, flame wolf, wind wolf, kill. Then, Yin Liujie roared like thunder, and the power of his whole body suddenly broke out. The 3 forces in the void evolved into 3 giant wolves, like mountains, and the space trembled under the pressure. Roar, roar, roar. In the next moment, the 3 giant wolves roared at the same time, and then moved at the same time. Suddenly, 3 terrifying suppressive forces, like a strangling storm, pressed down on Nie Tian. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He clearly felt that the power in the void was much more tyrannical than before. Under the urging of the power of wind, the power of ice and fire of Yin Liujie became even more terrifying. Nie Tian, you're dead. In the void, Yin Liujie let out a crazy sneer, and his pair of eyes became extremely red under extreme anger, which was very terrifying. The eyes of the crowd trembled, and they were extremely shocked. Yin Liujie was indeed one of the 9 wolves. He could actually burst out such a terrifying power. This time, Nie Tian absolutely couldn't resist. Drainage, you're too confident. At this time, Nie Tian's voice sounded, and under the impact of the violent power, it seemed harsh. Boom! In the next moment, the aura of his whole body was released crazily, and suddenly a terrible sword intent appeared, as if it was going to split the sky and earth, and hit the void as if it was going to explode. At the same time, there was an additional force in the void, and Nietion's sword intent was pushed to the extreme. Sword sealing forbidden formation, sword dragon annihilation. In the next moment, Nietion opened his mouth and his lips curled into a cold smile. Sword runes appeared beneath his feet, causing the sword will in his body to become violent and sharp. Roar! Immediately after, a low dragon roar rang out as a dragon made of sword intent appeared, coiling around in the air, exuding an imposing aura that shook the heavens and earth. It was as though it was the ruler of this world. What a terrifying power! The crowd's eyes trembled when they saw this. The shock in their hearts was at its peak. It was hard to imagine that Nietion had actually used the power of the sword formation to enhance the power of his sword intent. Boom! Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At this moment, under the watchful eyes of countless people, the sword dragon and the three wolves of ice, fire, and wind collided head-on. The void suddenly trembled, and a terrifying force exploded, spreading in all directions. The crowd was dumbfounded. It was hard to imagine that the battle in front of them was between two heavenly aura cultivators. Even a low-level warrior of the heavenly mandate realm would not be able to withstand such a terrifying battle. Bang! Bang! After a while, two muffled sounds came from the void, and two figures flew out from the endless waves, looking very embarrassed. These two figures were Nietion and Enliojia. However, Nietion's figure immediately stabilized in the void. There was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth, but his aura was still sharp, like a peerless sword, incomparably sharp. On the other hand, Enliojia was dripping with blood, and his body was trembling slightly. He seemed to have suffered a serious injury. Even Nietion was injured by that kind of impact just now, so Enliojia was even more unable to withstand it. However, Enliojia's aura was still there at this time. His eyes were red and bloodshot, staring at Nietion like a wolf. He didn't expect that even if he used the three wolves, he still wouldn't be able to kill Nietion. He didn't understand why Nietion's combat strength was so terrifying when he was only in the second tier of heavenly aura. At this moment, he looked at Nietion. In addition to resentment, there was also a trace of unconcealable fear in his heart. Enliojia, do you still want to fight? At this time, Nietion asked with a faint smile, with a hint of provocation. At this time, anyone could see that Enliojia was at an absolute disadvantage. If he continued to fight, the result would be predictable. Fight. Enliojia looked at Nietion, his pupils suddenly shrank, and he roared like a beast. The aura of his whole body surged wildly, and his eyes were extremely sharp. Enliojia is so seriously injured, does he still want to fight? Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but tremble and exclaim. In order to kill Nietion, Enliojia didn't even care about his own life? Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly, and he said, "Humph. If you want to fight, I will accompany you to the end." At this time, he hoped that Enliojia could retreat and take the initiative to admit defeat. He didn't want to continue fighting because he didn't want to consume too much energy. After all, there were still 4 battles waiting for him. But if Enliojia didn't know what was good for him, Nietion didn't mind killing him. Nietion, I Enliojia, will kill you today. Enliojia roared like thunder, and the aura of his whole body was released crazily, and a bloody aura was released. Feeling this aura fluctuation, Nietion couldn't help but tremble, and his heart was filled with surprise. It seemed that Enliojia was releasing a strange bloodline power. Nietion, do you think the 7 wolves' final kill is only this? Enliojia said in a low voice, and the evil killing intent in his eyes was about to burst out. He seemed to have gone mad, and his eyes were filled with bloody killing intent. Nietion frowned and couldn't help but shake his head. He really didn't understand why Enliojia would have such great resentment. In fact, there was no grudge between him and Enliojia. To put it bluntly, in the restaurant, the two were just quarreling. Nie Tian didn't care at all, but Yin Liujie regarded him as an enemy who would not rest until he was dead, which made him feel puzzled. Boom! At this moment, a terrifying aura surged out from Yin Liujie's body, and it was actually several times stronger than before. Yin Liujie, so this is your real strength. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, and he said in a deep voice. It seemed that Yin Liujie was going to use his final trump card. The eyes of the crowd trembled, looking forward to Yin Liujie's next move. Enough! However, at this moment, a low voice suddenly sounded, and everyone was stunned. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice, and the person who spoke turned out to be Yin Liujie's teacher, the leader of the Seven Wolves mercenary group, Huang Lang. Teacher! Yin Liujie suddenly raised his head, and his eyes trembled as he shouted. Liujie, this battle is over. Come back. Huang Lang looked at Yin Liujie and said indifferently, and in his calm tone, there was an inviolable dominance. But Yin Liujie's eyes trembled, and he was very unwilling to give up, but he still wanted to persist. Chapter 35-39. Chapter 35-34. Chapter 35-34 Hell. Huang Lang said in a low voice, looking at Yin Liujie with unquestionable eyes. Yes. Yin Liujie's eyes trembled, but he finally nodded and the aura around his body dissipated. He really wanted to kill Nie Tian at this time, but he didn't dare to disobey Huang Lang's words. Nie Tian, consider yourself lucky. Yin Liujie glanced at Nie Tian with a cold and sinister gaze. After saying that, his figure moved and directly left the arena, returning to Huang Lang's side. Am I lucky? Nie Tian looked at Yin Liujie with a faint smile and didn't comment. The aura displayed by Yin Liujie just now was indeed very terrifying, but it wasn't to the point where Nie Tian was afraid. If Yin Liujie really made a move, it was hard to say what the result would be. Huang Lang stopping Yin Liujie was out of Nie Tian's expectation. However, it wasn't strange. After all, the Night of Wolf contest was about to begin. Huang Lang might think that it was better for Yin Liujie to save his strength for the contest. Teacher, why did you stop me? At this time, Yin Liujie returned to Huang Lang's side, his eyes slightly trembling, and he asked unwillingly. Liujie, that move of yours was used to take the leader of the Night of Wolf contest, not to kill this kid. You've already injured him, and that's enough. Someone will take this kid's life. Huang Lang smiled faintly, and as he spoke, he turned his gaze to the other side. There were two figures standing in his line of sight. One was a middle-aged man, and the other was a young man. It's them. Yin Liujie couldn't help but exclaim when he saw the two people. He didn't expect the Ghost Wolf mercenary group to also come. These two figures were none other than the leader of the Ghost Wolf mercenary group and the #1 genius of the Ghost Wolf mercenary group, Liang Gui. The Ghost Wolf mercenary group was a mercenary group on par with the Seven Wolves mercenary group in the Night of Wolf Mountain, and the #1 genius of the Ghost Wolf mercenary group, Liang Gui, was also one of the 9 wolves, just like Yin Liujie. Yin Liujie didn't expect the leader of the Ghost Wolf mercenary group and Liang Gui to also come here. It was obvious that the two of them had seen the battle just now. Yin Liujie naturally understood that the person who took Nie Tian's life was Liang Gui. Brother Yin, you've lost this battle. I'll help you win it back. At this moment, Liang Gui also noticed Yin Liujie. He took a step forward and said with a faint smile. Yin Liujie's face was gloomy and he did not speak. Liang Gui's words were obviously mocking him. He had exchanged blows with Liang Gui several times. Both of them had wins and losses, and their strengths were about the same. At this moment, Liang Gui was about to fight Nie Tian. He had a huge advantage. On one hand, Nie Tian was slightly injured. On the other hand, he had seen Nie Tian's previous attack, so he was already prepared. It seemed that Liang Gui was very confident in his battle with Nie Tian. I'm going. Seeing that Yin Liujie did not speak, Liang Gui laughed even more proudly. Then, his figure moved and went directly to the arena. Damn it! That kid got lucky. Yin Liujie looked at Liang Gui's figure with a pair of extremely gloomy eyes and cursed. Liujie, don't worry about it. The leader of the Wolf Knight is your ultimate goal. You must get that thing for me. The leader of the Ghost Wolves, Gui Shan, looked at Yin Liujie and secretly transmitted his voice to him. Yes. Don't worry, Liujie will not let you down. Yin Liujie nodded and said solemnly. He knew that the reward for the leader of the Wolf Knight contest was a very special thing, which was exactly what Gui Shan needed. It was precisely because of this that Gui Shan did not let Yin Liujie fight. He did not want any accidents to happen to the latter before the Cold Night contest. 4 more matches. At this moment, the eyes of the crowd trembled, and they all looked very excited. If he won 4 more matches, Nie Tian would be able to take the Sky Wolf Challenge this time. As one of the 9 wolves, Yin Liujie was defeated by Nie Tian. Who else would dare to challenge Nie Tian next? Look, it's Liang Gui. Just as the crowd was puzzled, someone saw Liang Gui's figure and could not help but exclaim, "It's really Liang Gui." The eyes of the others trembled, and their expressions changed. Who would have thought that after Yin Liujie, another 9-wolf martial artist would appear and challenge Nie Tian? As one of the 9 wolves, Liang Gui's strength was not weaker than Yin Liujie's. If he were to fight, there would be a high chance of winning. After all, Nie Tian had also suffered some injuries after the previous battle, and his strength and trump cards were almost fully displayed. At least in the eyes of the crowd, Nie Tian's strength was approaching the limit. What they did not know was that Nie Tian's true terrifying strength had not been used yet. Huh! Nie Tian looked at Liang Gui, and his expression changed slightly. He sensed an extremely dark power from the latter, and it was very terrifying. Nie Tian, I will end your path to the Sky Wolf Challenge. Liang Gui took a step forward and looked at Nie Tian coldly. Just you. Nie Tian immediately calmed down and said with a calm smile, How much stronger are you compared to Yin Liujie? Humph. Liang Gui let out a mocking laugh and said, Nie Tian, you're quite confident. However, overconfidence is considered arrogance. Is that so? Nie Tianling let out a hollow laugh and said, Let's fight then. Sure. Liang Gui let out a smile once again, before he took a step forward. Instantly, a terrifying force was unleashed, causing the surrounding space to sink and the entire stage to tremble. Following this, a tremendous force of darkness descended upon the stage like a boundless hell, crushing down on Nie Tian. Hell of 8 desolation. Everyone felt the evil aura coming from the space, and their eyes trembled with fear as they cried out in alarm. Rumors had it that Liang Gui had cultivated the Hell of 8 Desolation art, which allowed him to unleash the Hell of 8 Desolation, killing a cultivator straight away. No one had expected Liang Gui to use the Hell of 8 Desolation right away. It was obvious that he was planning to kill Nie Tian right away. This guy is trying to kill Nie Tian in an instant. Yin Liujie's eyes flickered with a dark expression. He had fought against Liang Gui several times, thus he knew how powerful the latter was. Normal cultivators had no chance against the Hell of 8 Desolation, especially those who were fighting against Liang Gui for the first time. They could easily be killed if they were caught off guard. It was obvious that Liang Gui was trying to kill Nie Tian by surprise, to show the crowd his terrifying strength. Nie Tian, I will kill you with the Hell of 8 Desolation. Accept your death. Liang Gui's deep voice was heard from the sky, filled with murderous intent. Bang! In the sky, the chi of 8 desolation surged toward him like a tidal wave. A giant dark vortex appeared, as if it was the source of all darkness, crushing down on Nie Tian. Nice move. Nie Tian could feel the incoming force, causing his gaze to freeze. His lips twitched as he said with a strange smile, Unfortunately, it doesn't work on me. Chapter 3540. Get lost. Is that kid crazy? The crowd screamed in astonishment when they saw Nye Tian charging straight into the whirlpool of the 8 Desolation Hell. Everyone could sense that the 8 Desolation Chi was the strongest inside the whirlpool, thus it was definitely the most dangerous place. Nye Tian charging straight into it was no different from asking for death. Liang Gui's eyes flickered upon seeing this. His face was not filled with joy, but astonishment, or even fear. He did not expect Nye Tian to charge straight into the 8 Desolation Heart. How is this possible? Gui Shan's eyes widened as his face was filled with astonishment, as if he was in a panic. Could it be that Nye Tian had figured out that the key to breaking through the 8 Desolation Hell was the 8 Desolation Heart? The whirlpool was the 8 Desolation Heart, which was also the key to breaking through the 8 Desolation Hell. The 8 Desolation Heart had the strongest aura, which was extremely intimidating. Ordinary cultivators would not dare to get close to it. However, Nye Tian did the exact opposite and charged straight into the 8 Desolation Heart. There could only be one explanation for such a crazy move. Nye Tian could tell that the 8 Desolation Heart was the key to breaking through the 8 Desolation Hell. But how did he know that? It was his first time seeing the 8 Desolation Hell. Were his senses and comprehension really that terrifying? Gui Shan could not figure it out. His face turned extremely dark and unpleasant. At this time, the martial stage was filled with dense, desolate qi. Those who were close to the martial stage could feel a terrifying, oppressive aura. However, after Nye Tian's figure disappeared, he did not reappear, causing the crowd to have strange looks on their faces. Nye Tian, is he going to die just like that? The crowd's eyes were trembling, as they could not accept the fact. Nye Tian had shocked the crowd too much previously. It was unbelievable that he had died just like that. Bang! However, at that instant, the 8 Desolation Hell vibrated vigorously with a loud bang, as if it was about to collapse. What's going on? Everyone's eyes widened in shock, not knowing what was going on. Oh no! Liang Gui's pupils constricted. He knew that something was wrong and his expression was extremely ugly. He could not believe that Nye Tian's martial body could withstand the impact of the heart of 8 Desolation. Boom! Bang bang bang! At that moment, an explosion could be heard as the entire 8 Desolation Hell collapsed. Streams of 8 Desolation Chi spread out in all directions like a space-time storm. How is this possible? The crowd's eyes trembled as they exclaimed in unison. They couldn't believe their eyes. How could the 8 Desolation Hell, which was as stable as a mountain, collapse in an instant? Bang! In the next moment, a muffled sound was heard. Liang Gui seemed to have been hit by an invisible force. His body trembled and he was sent flying, leaving a trail of blood in the air. The sudden turn of events caused the crowd to gasp in shock. They had no idea what was going on. At that moment, Nye Tian's figure appeared. Like a sharp sword, he stood coldly in the air, emanating a sharp aura. Nye Tian has destroyed Liang Gui's 8 Desolation Hell. What's going on? The crowd was astounded, as if they were in an illusion. Meanwhile, the 3 Wolf Kings, the 2 leaders of the Wild Wolf Ghost Mountain, and many experts were stunned by the scene before them. They were speechless for a long time. Could it be that the heart of 8 Desolation is the key to destroying the 8 Desolation Hell? Liujie was stunned for a long time. His eyes were trembling as he exclaimed in his heart. He had fought against Liang Gui several times, and he had to spend a lot of energy to resist the 8 Desolation Chi. He could only suppress the 8 Desolation Hell, but Nye Tian was able to destroy it directly. It was unbelievable. How could Nye Tian be so terrifying, to be able to discover the weakness of the 8 Desolation Hell with a single glance? Su Kuanga was stunned as well. He had the same thought as Liujie. How did you know? At that moment, Liang Gui managed to stabilize his body. He asked in shock despite the serious injuries on his body. How did I know the weakness of the 8 Desolation Hell? Nye Tian smiled and said, It's just a barrier, what's so difficult about it? A barrier? That's right, the 8 Desolation Hell was a barrier, and the heart of 8 Desolation was the eye of the barrier. Nye Tian relied on the perception of the eternal night demon fox to sense the strangeness of the heart of 8 Desolation. Moreover, the ghost emperor was still around, so he was certain that the heart of 8 Desolation was the eye of the barrier. You! Liang Gui's eyes trembled in shock. He was speechless for a moment. The 8 Desolation Hell that he was most proud of was so weak in Nye Tian's words. How did you resist the 8 Desolation Qi? Liang Gui's eyes trembled as he asked again. Even if Nye Tian could tell that the heart of 8 Desolation was the eye of the barrier, the 8 Desolation Qi inside the heart of 8 Desolation was extremely strong. How could Nye Tian, who was only at the 2nd level of heavenly aura, resist it? Your Desolation Qi poses no threat to me at all. Nye Tian let out a cold laugh, looking incomparably arrogant. His martial body was already strong, and the power of the Way of Heaven had a strong restraining effect on the 8 Desolation Qi, so he was completely unafraid of it. Not to mention that Liang Gui was at the 9th level of heavenly aura. Even if he was a heavenly mandate realm expert, he would still be no match for Nye Tian. Nye Tian's power had an absolute suppression over him. Liang Gui's eyes trembled. He was so angry that he couldn't say a word and spat out a mouthful of blood. You're worse than Yin Liujie. Get lost. Nye Tianling laughed and said. Liang Gui's eyes trembled. He was unwilling to give up, but he still left the stage. He was already lucky that Nye Tian didn't kill him. If he continued to fight, he would be courting death. The crowd watched Liang Gui leave the stage. Many of them were still in a daze. High up in the sky, the experts fixed their eyes on Nye Tian, their faces filled with shock. Nye Tian still had 3 rounds left. He only needed to win 3 more rounds to defeat the Sky Picking Wolf. Xiao Chen had already defeated 2 9-wolf cultivators in a row. What kind of genius would dare to challenge him next? Nye Tian is too strong. I'm afraid no one can stop him from defeating the Sky Picking Wolf, the crowd whispered, thinking that no one would be able to stop Nye Tian in the next 3 rounds. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Nye Tian's mouth as he ran his gaze across the crowd. At this moment, he actually hoped that a stronger opponent would show up. Let me have a taste of your strength. Right at this moment, a clear and pleasant voice resounded, and then a blue-clothed figure appeared and descended gracefully onto the arena. Nye Tian suddenly raised his head and saw a girl in blue. His expression could not help but change. The blue-clothed girl looked very young, as if she was not even as old as Wenren Xiang. Her facial features were exquisite, and her skin was extremely smooth. Her eyes flickered with a clear light, as if she was a fairy who did not eat the food of the mortal world. She was the most beautiful woman Nye Tian had seen since coming to the Saints' world. However, her appearance was not what Nye Tian paid attention to the most. What shocked Nye Tian the most was her strength. She was actually at the 9th level of heavenly aura. Chapter 35-41. Unstoppable, the Oracle Realm. Nye Tian looked at the girl in blue and couldn't help but be shocked. This was the first time he had seen such a young Oracle swordsman, and this Oracle swordsman turned out to be a young girl. The appearance of the girl in blue also surprised the surrounding crowd, and they began to discuss among themselves. Who is this girl? She actually dares to challenge Nye Tian at this time. This girl looks very young, but she's already at the 9th layer of Heavenly Yun. Her talent is so strong. Her talent in the way of the sword is even stronger. She's already at the 1st layer of the Oracle Realm. Could it be that she's even stronger than Yin Liujie and Liang Gui? As the crowd discussed, the way they looked at the girl in blue slightly changed. There was some fear and some excitement. Such a young Oracle swordsman was indeed terrifying. The stronger the girl in blue was, the greater the hope of defeating Nye Tian. This made the crowd even more excited. However, the strange thing was that no one recognized the girl in blue even though there were so many people present. With her talent, she should be a top genius of the seventh sacred world of cultivators. There were countless experts present, and they were all big shots from various sects, but no one recognized the girl in blue. "Your name is Nietian, right?" At this moment the girl in blue spoke. Her voice was calm and ethereal. It was very pleasant and could instantly attract the attention of others, making them want to continue listening. Nietian's response was very plain and he only nodded. "My name is Lan Zhuing." Lan Zhuing smiled and introduced herself. She then smiled gently and said, "You've already won 97 battles. You only need 3 more to defeat the Heavenly Wolf. However, I'm sorry, but I can't let you continue." His calm voice caused everyone's eyes to tremble. They were extremely shocked. Anyone could hear the confidence in Lan Zhuing's tone. "You're very confident, but no one can stop my path." Nietian looked at Lan Zhuing and the corner of his mouth twitched. Aside from confidence, there was also a bit of domineeringness. This challenge to the celestial wolf didn't just concern his own life, but also Duanmu Lu and his other disciples. For himself, for Duanmu Lu and the others, Nietian must win. "You are also very confident. I like confident opponents." Lan Zhuing faintly smiled, the corners of her mouth slightly raised. There was no killing intent in her eyes, but there was a kind of soul-shaking deterrence in her eyes. "Make your move." Nietian narrowed his eyes and said, "All right." Lan Zhuing nodded calmly. In the next instant, her smiling face turned solemn. Outside her body, surging sword will was released, hitting the void space. It was extremely sharp, as if it was going to tear the world apart. What a strong sword intent! Nietian's pupils constricted slightly as he sensed an extremely strong threat from the fluctuations of sword intent in the air. "Nietian, let's see if you can handle my first attack." Just then, Lan Zhuing's voice rang out. Her silhouette stood in the air, like a peerless sword, sharp and blinding. Whoosh! In the next instant, an ice-blue sword appeared in her hand. Holding it in her hand, it was like flowing water, crystal clear. However, the sword was emitting a chilling intent that seemed to be able to penetrate one's soul. "Moon over the azure sea, triple wave." Then, Lan Zhuing spoke softly. The sword in her hand swirled in the air, and immediately, 3 giant waves that resembled giant beasts appeared and charged towards Nietian. Nietian's eyes narrowed and his heart shuddered. Lan Zhuing's sword intent was extremely strange. It looked extremely powerful, but in reality, it was extremely sharp. Within the 3 giant waves, there was a sharp aura that seemed to be able to kill everything. What a terrifying sword move! Feeling the terrifying aura in the space, the crowd could not help but exclaim in shock. The aura of the sword was enough to prove that Lan Zhuing was much more terrifying than Yin Liujie and Liang Gui. Sacred heaven-defying sword, unity of heaven and human, sacrifice of the sun. Immediately after, Nietian reacted. The starlight heavenly slash streaked across the sky, and directly slashed out. A terrifying sword shadow appeared, and the terrifying aura it exuded caused the void to tremble, as though it was about to collapse. Nietian could feel how terrifying Lan Zhuing was. If any one of the 3 giant waves were to hit him head-on, it would be enough to injure him severely. Therefore, he did not hesitate to use the unity of heaven and human move. Boom! In the next instant, the sword shadow collided with the 3 giant waves, causing the space to tremble. It was as if the entire world was about to be destroyed. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Bang! Then, under the watchful eyes of countless people, the sword shadow forcibly tore the 3 giant waves apart. However, at the same time, it could not sustain the impact of the giant waves and directly collapsed. Nietian's eyes trembled slightly. At the place where the void collapsed, endless power raged, causing the space to fall into chaos. After a while, His figure retreated rapidly and stopped a few thousand meters away. He was extremely shocked. He had blocked Lan Zhuing's first move, but it was very difficult. On the other hand, Lan Zhuing had only casually swung her sword, which showed how powerful she was. "That girl in blue is so terrifying!" The crowd was shocked and exclaimed. They were shocked by Lan Zhuing's strength. Although Lan Zhuing's sword did not defeat Nie Tian, it forced Nie Tian back a few thousand meters. It was enough to show how terrifying her strength was. High up in the sky, Su Qing looked at Lan Zhuing. His eyes trembled slightly as he thought to himself, "Who is this girl in blue?" Whether it was talent or strength, the girl in blue was far above Yin Liujie and Liang Gui. However, Su Qing had never heard of such a monstrous person in the seventh sacred cultivator's world of cultivators. The other two wolf kings were also shocked and had the same doubt in their eyes as Su Qing. The other powerhouses, such as Huang Lang, Gui Shan, and the others, also did not know the origin of the girl in blue. They could only be secretly surprised. Huh! At this time, Lan Zhuing looked at Nie Tian and could not help but exclaim in surprise. Then, a look of pleasant surprise appeared on her face. She smiled and said, "Nie Tian, you actually blocked my first move." Nie Tian looked at Lan Zhuing and could not help but frown. Although Lan Zhuing was surprised, she gave Nie Tian a feeling that she was even more arrogant. It turned out that in her eyes, Nie Tian should not have been able to block even one move from her. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he said coldly, "Continue with your second move." "Okay." Lan Zhuing seemed to be a little excited at this moment. She said, "Nie Tian, you are the most interesting person I have ever seen. If you can block 2 more moves from me, I will admit defeat." "2 moves?" Nie Tian frowned. The corner of his mouth twitched coldly as he said, "You are too confident." Lan Zhuing was indeed too confident. She was certain that Nie Tian would not be able to block 3 moves from her. Nie Tian, the first move just now was a casual one. It was just a test. Lan Zhuing smiled faintly and said, "You have to be careful with the next 2 moves." As her voice faded, her body slightly moved. Suddenly, the sword aura around her body exploded and became several times stronger than before. Chapter 35-42. Sword spirit body in the air, above the martial stage, Lan Zhuing's entire body's sword force exploded out. At the same time, her eyes actually had a strange change, continuously releasing rays of blue light. Outside her eyes, they formed many ice blue runes that floated in the air, looking extremely strange. When Nie Tian saw this scene, he could not help but narrow his eyes and let out a cry of surprise. Could Lan Zhuing be a martial artist with other pupils? Lan Zhuing's eyes were strange. She did look like a martial artist with other pupils, but Nie Tian couldn't sense any eye power from her eyes. Instead, he sensed a powerful sword intent. That pair of eyes seemed to contain a bottomless abyss of sword intent, which was exceptionally terrifying. Nie Tian couldn't understand why Lan Zhuing's eyes could emit such a terrifying sword intent. "Don't tell me." Just as he was feeling confused, the Ghost Emperor's voice rang out. "Sword spirit body." The Ghost Emperor paused for a moment before continuing. "A sword spirit?" Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and he couldn't help but go blank. He had never heard of sword spirit body before. It sounded like a special martial body. The so-called sword spirit body is an extremely rare bloodline martial body. The Ghost Emperor was silent for a moment before he explained. Martial artists with sword spirit body have the sword intent of heaven and earth in their blood. It could even be said that their entire body is filled with sword intent. Rumor has it that when a sword spirit body is developed to the extreme, their entire body will be filled with sword intent. They can merge with the heaven and earth and comprehend the supreme sword intent of heaven and earth. Nie Tian's eyes flickered, and his expression froze slightly. So terrifying! This girl's sword spirit body is different from ordinary sword spirit bodies. Her eyes were the first to awaken the sword intent of heaven and earth. This is too strange. The Ghost Emperor frowned and said. He also found it strange that Lan Zhuing's eyes were the first to awaken the sword intent of heaven and earth. It seems that the next two moves won't be easy. Nie Tian's eyes darkened as he stared at Lan Zhuing. No wonder Lan Zhuing was so confident. She had a sword spirit body. The crowd looked at Lan Zhuing, their eyes trembling in shock. Everyone could feel the change in Lan Zhuing's sword momentum, and they could also see her strange eyes, but they didn't know what happened to Lan Zhuing. The sword spirit body was extremely rare, and very few people knew about it. The second sword. At this time, Lan Zhuing's eyes flickered and she said in a deep voice, "Jade sea reflects the moon, waves devour the sky." Boom! As soon as her voice rang out, a rumbling sound rang out, and heaven and earth trembled. Terrifying sword intent filled the sky like raging sand, blotting out heaven and earth, and crushing down on Nie Tian with great force. The impact of such a terrifying sword intent was terrifying. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, but before he could make a move, he was drowned by the terrifying sword intent. Upon seeing this, everyone's expressions flickered as they sucked in a breath of cold air. Was Nie Tian going to be killed just like that? Nie Tian, you've lost. Lan Zhuing stood in the air and murmured, "You really can't block my second sword." Nie Tian was drowned by her sword intent. She absolutely didn't believe that he could survive. Is that so? However, before Lan Zhuing's voice died away, a low voice rang. Then, from the rolling clouds, a terrifying qi shot up to the sky. Then, a crimson dragon appeared and broke through the clouds. On top of the dragon stood a silhouette. It was Nie Tian. Huh! Lan Zhuing saw that Nie Tian broke through the clouds, and her blue eyes trembled in disbelief. How is this possible? Nie Tian was actually able to rush out of the layers of clouds? The crowd was stunned as well, and they couldn't react for a long time. Lan Zhuing, the second sword is over. It's time for the third sword. Nie Tian smiled faintly and stared at Lan Zhuing. Damn it! Lan Zhuing frowned. The calmness on her pretty face was instantly replaced by anger. She never thought that Nie Tian would be so terrifying. Nie Tian, you can't block my third sword. In the next second, Lan Zhuing's eyes darkened. Rays of sword intent gushed out of her and her aura was much more violent than before. From the looks of it, Lan Zhuing was really angry. Azure sea reflects the moon, sea beast swallows the sky. Then, Lan Zhuing growled. The terrifying sword intent around her turned violent in an instant, as if it was going to swallow up the entire heaven and earth. The sword spirit body is really strong. Nie Tian was secretly surprised when he sensed the fluctuations in the void. However, a strange smile appeared on his face. Roar. At this moment, a low roar suddenly rang out in the air. After that, a gigantic blue beast appeared, resembling a gigantic fish dragon. Its deep blue body rolled about, causing the heavens and earth to tremble. Whoosh! In the next moment, the giant beast roared, and its terrifying aura pressed down on Nie Tian like a mountain. Nie Tian's expression flickered as he sensed the oppressive power assaulting his face. Starry Sky 9 Limits, 5th Limit Moonfall. However, in the next moment, his eyes focused and the corners of his mouth curled into a strange smile. The starry sky slashed across the sky and a terrifying sword shadow appeared, bombarding the giant beast. This was the first time he had used the 5th limit of the Starry Sky 9 limits, Moonfall. Previously, the 4th, 5th, and 6th limits of the Starry Sky 9 limits were activated at the same time. However, Nie Tian had only used the 4th limit, Starfall. He had never used the 5th and 6th limit. Just now, when he was engulfed by Lan Zhuing's sword intent, he comprehended the 5th limit under such extreme circumstances. Lan Zhuing was a sword spirit body. Her sword intent was filled with the aura of the great path of heaven and earth. It contained the true meaning of the martial path and the sword path. It was not surprising that Nye Tian comprehended something under the influence of that sword intent. Boom! In the next instant, the sword shadow descended and bombarded the ice-blue beast. A huge hole appeared on the body of the ice-blue beast. After that, the entire body of the ice-blue beast crumbled into pieces. Bang! Then, a muffled sound was heard. Under the impact of the violent force, Nye Tian's figure was pushed back thousands of meters. When he stabilized his body, a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. However, his aura did not change. It was still as strong as before. Lan Zhuiying was also pushed back thousands of meters by the huge force. However, she was not injured. In the collision of the third sword, she still had the upper hand. However, at this moment, Lan Zhuiying's face was extremely cold and ugly. Chapter 35-43. Chapter 35-38. Yin-Yang Twin Killers. Lan Zhuiying, the third strike is over. You've lost, Nye Tian said to Lan Zhuiying from afar with a faint smile on his face. Lan Zhuiying's beautiful eyes flickered with a cold light, as if she wanted to attack again. But after a long moment of hesitation, she held back. Since she had said it, she could not take it back. She had lost this battle. Nye Tian, if there's a chance, I would like to fight you again, Lan Zhuiying said to Nye Tian. Sure, Nye Tian said with a calm smile on his face. Actually, defeating Lan Zhuiying in this way was a little unfair. But Nye Tian felt that this was nothing. After all, he had not used his true strength. Even if they continued, he was confident that he could defeat Lan Zhuiying. It was just that he would need to use up a lot of energy. Next, there were 2 more battles waiting for him. He wanted to conserve his strength. She lost just like that? The crowd was stunned for a long time before they finally reacted. Who would have thought that Lan Zhuiying would lose to Nye Tian in such a manner? To most people, Lan Zhuiying was stronger than Nye Tian. After all, Nye Tian was at a disadvantage in all 3 strikes. Lan Zhuiying glanced at Nye Tian, and then her figure flashed as she left the arena. Next, there were 2 more battles. All eyes were on Nye Tian, but no one said a word. Nye Tian had defeated a demonic swordsman like the girl in blue. Who else could be his opponent? After a long time, the arena was still silent. No one stepped onto the arena. 5 days were about to pass. If no one challenged Nye Tian, he would automatically pass the Sky Wolf challenge. After witnessing Nye Tian's methods, anyone who wanted to enter the arena would have to think twice. Su Qing looked at Nye Tian and said with a faint smile, "Considering Nye Tian's strength, I'm afraid only that guy is a match for him." "Brother Su, you're talking about the leader of the 9 wolves, Blind Sword Bodhizi, right?" Another Wolf King looked at Su Qing and asked, "Who else could it be other than Blind Sword?" Su Qing faintly smiled and said, "Unfortunately, the Blind Sword is still in seclusion. He will only appear during the Night of Wolves. If Blind Sword was here, this kid wouldn't have made it this far." The Wolf King laughed bitterly and said, "Now it seems that this kid basically has victory in his grasp. Blind Sword Bodhizi, the leader of the Wolf Knight 9 Wolves, known as the strongest genius of Wolf Knight Mountain." After Nye Tian defeated Yin Liujie and Liang Gui, Su Qing and the others naturally thought of Blind Sword. In their opinion, Blind Sword might be the only one who could defeat Nye Tian. "Kid, we brothers challenge you. Do you dare to accept?" At this moment, a hoarse voice resounded in the air. Following which, a cultivator dressed in black appeared and stared cold at Nye Tian. Nye Tian looked at that person and his eyes narrowed. That person was short and fat, and his facial features were squeezed together, making him look extremely ugly. However, his strength was not weak, and he was already at the 9th level of heavenly charm. An evil aura circulated around his body, and it was incomparably sinister. "If you want to fight, just come down." Nye Tian became cold and said coldly, "Come down. Kid, we brothers have always fought together. Are you willing to accept our challenge?" The stout martialist didn't speak, but another voice rang out. A tall and thin man appeared in midair. Nie Tion's eyes widened as he looked at the man. This man was tall and thin, but his aura was very similar to that of the stout martialist. However, there were still some differences, as if the same force had been divided into two parts. Although there was a huge difference in their stature, their appearances were very similar. Two people? Nie Tion frowned and couldn't help but smile. These two guys wanted to challenge him at the same time, 2 against 1. Yes. The two nodded in unison, and their eyes flickered coldly. These two are the Yin-Yang Calamity. At this moment, Su Cheng's eyes flickered as he recognized the two martialists. Yin-Yang twin evils. The eyes of the other two wolf kings quivered. They were both stunned, and their expressions were extremely shocked. They are the Yin-Yang Calamity. On the other side, Huang Leng's eyes flickered and he also exclaimed, Yin-Yang Calamity. At this moment, the crowd reacted and exclaimed in unison. Their faces were filled with panic, as if they had seen something terrifying. Nie Tion glanced around and couldn't help but frown. It seemed that these two brothers, one tall and one short, were quite famous. That's right, we are the Yin-Yang Calamity. The two looked at the crowd and said in an extremely arrogant manner. Nie Tion's face sank after seeing this. Following this, he heard the crowd discussing among themselves. They are the Yin-Yang Calamity. Rumor has it that these two are extremely cruel. They practice some kind of evil skill that allows them to steal the Yin and Yang Qi from young boys and girls. Yeah, I heard that these two have killed hundreds of thousands of young boys and girls. Hundreds of thousands? You are underestimating them. I heard that they have killed millions of young boys and girls. These two are so cruel and weak, how did they survive until now? Don't you know? They have a powerful teacher called the Yin-Yang Old Man, who came from the upper paradise. As the crowd spoke, they looked at the Yin-Yang Calamity with even more fear. Nie Tion squinted his eyes and looked at the Yin-Yang Calamity without any fear. Instead, his eyes were extremely gloomy and filled with killing intent. Kid, are you willing to fight us, brothers? At this moment, the short and fat Yin Sha sneered and asked provocatively. No way. Before Nie Tion could speak, Su Cheng's voice was heard. He said loudly, the sky-picking wolf has always been a one-on-one fight. There has never been a two-on-one fight. Not in the past, but we can now. The skinny Yin Sha smirked and looked at Su Cheng. Lord Wolf King, let us brothers fight together. One fight counts as two, all right? Of course not. Su Cheng's eyes darkened as he rejected the offer cold. Nie Tion had already come this far. It was too dangerous to fight the Yin-Yang Calamity at the same time. There was no need to take the risk. Can't we? Yin Sha frowned and a strange smile appeared on his face. He said, if you can't, we brothers will have to do something unsightly today. Su Cheng's face darkened. He did not expect the Yin-Yang Calamity to threaten him. You all know that the Yin-Yang Calamity can steal the Yin and Yang Qi of young boys and girls. However, you have only heard of it and have never seen it. Why don't I show you today? Yin Sha smirked and suddenly stretched out his palm. Suddenly, a space-time aura surged out and 7 or 8 children appeared. It seemed that he had opened some kind of space-time artifact and let these children out. The crowd's eyes trembled and they could not help but gasp in shock. Chapter 35:44. Chapter 35:39. You deserve to die. Wah, I want my mother. After the children appeared, they immediately started crying pitifully. Listen, these little dolls are crying so pitifully. Yin Sha looked at the children and smiled coldly. Then, he picked up a little girl and released a wave of baleful Yin Qi that enveloped the little girl. Then, a shocking scene happened. The little girl struggled a few times, but before she could even scream, she turned into a pile of bones. Everyone's eyes trembled. They were completely shocked by the scene in front of them. They sucked in a mouthful of cold air, and felt a chill run down their spine. Insha was simply too cruel. He actually took the life of a little girl just like that. However, everyone could only watch helplessly. No one made a move. Everyone knew the origin of the yin-yang double demons. The yin-yang old man behind them was simply too terrifying. He was an expert that stood at the peak of the seventh sacred world of cultivators. Su Qing frowned and his expression turned cold. However, he did not say anything and only watched coldly. He did not expect the yin-yang double demons to be so despicable. They used such a method to force Nie Tian to accept the challenge. At this time, Insha looked at Nie Tian and asked with a cold smile, "Brat, do you want to accept the challenge or watch these little dolls die in front of you?" He did not notice that Nie Tian's eyes were extremely cold and his killing intent was on the verge of going berserk. Yang Sha looked at Nie Tian and asked, "Brat, do you dare to accept the challenge? You deserve to die." Nie Tian's eyes were filled with killing intent as he spoke word by word. "Looks like you've accepted the challenge." The yin-yang double demons chuckled. Then, Insha put away the children. At this time, Nie Tian's eyes sank and he said cold, "Before we fight, I want you to hand over those children." The scene just now made him completely furious. He did not make a move yet because he was worried about the safety of those children. "All right." Insha chuckled and directly agreed. Then, a gourd-like object appeared in his hand. He threw it to Su Qing and said, "Lord Wolf King, please help us look after these children. These children are things that Lord Teacher needs. Nothing can happen to them." Su Qing took the item. His eyes were extremely gloomy, and he didn't say anything. The Yin Fiend had said this on purpose, obviously using the yin-yang old man to threaten him. Old man Yin-Yang's reputation in the seventh sacred cultivator of true cultivators was simply too great. He had once destroyed several first-rate sects in the seventh sacred cultivator of true cultivators by himself. Even evil Moon Tianlang would not want to offend such a cultivator unless he had no other choice. The yin-yang twin ghosts were very confident that as long as Nie Tian dared to fight with them, he would definitely die. "Nie Tian, have you thought it through?" Su Qing looked at Nie Tian and asked. As long as Nie Tian refused to accept the challenge, no one could force him. After all, these children that were captured by the yin-yang double ghosts had nothing to do with him. "You've thought it through very clearly." Nie Tian's eyes were as cold as ice. "All right." Su Qing frowned, nodded and said, "This is the last battle, the last two matches." Has Nie Tian gone crazy? The crowd's eyes trembled and their expressions changed. They didn't expect Nie Tian to actually accept the challenge of the yin-yang twin ghosts. Could Nie Tian really win against the yin-yang twin ghosts at the same time? More importantly, the yin-yang twin ghosts had the yin-yang old man behind them. Even if Nie Tian was strong enough, would he dare to kill these two people? "Brat, you're dead." At this moment the Yin Fiend took a step forward. His eyes were ice-cold as he said, "Brat, our yin-yang twin ghosts can instantly kill a cultivator at the 5th level of the Heavenly Mandate realm. Can your strength surpass that of a cultivator at the 5th level of the Heavenly Mandate realm?" The Yin Fiend chuckled, and his entire body began to release violent Yang Fiend Qi. The yin-yang twin ghosts absorbed the extreme yin qi of the young girl, and the extreme yang qi of the young boy. They used these two powers to cultivate and continuously strengthen their martial bodies. Either of these two people had strength comparable to Yin Liujie and the others. The two of them had once killed a cultivator at the 5th level of the Heavenly Mandate realm. Nie Tian was just a cultivator at the 2nd level of the Heavenly Mandate realm. Of course, they didn't take him seriously. In fact, they were just passing by the Wolf's Night Mountain. When they heard about the Sky Wolf Challenge and the huge bet, they couldn't help but make their move. "You're dead." Nie Tian's eyes were filled with killing intent. His eyes trembled slightly, and a terrifying eye power was slowly released. "Don't give him a chance. Just kill him." The Yin Fiend frowned. He felt the eye power fluctuation in Nye Tian's eyes. He had a bad feeling and suddenly turned to the young fiend. "Alright." The young fiend agreed. His young fiend chi surged to the extreme, making him look like an extremely dense dark cloud. It was extremely terrifying. At the same time, the Yin fiend began to release his young fiend chi. The aura of the two merged perfectly. The void was covered by a terrifying darkness, as if it had fallen into an eternal night. Die. In the next second, the yin-yang double evils roared at the same time. Instantly, a terrifying black light was released. A bloody and violent aura covered the sky and earth as it rushed towards Nye Tian. So scary. The crowd's eyes trembled as they exclaimed. They felt like their bodies were about to be torn apart under the pressure of the yang double evils. Boom. After that, the entire arena was enveloped by a monstrous black light, and it was extremely terrifying. Nye Tian sensed that the murderous aura in the air was like an invisible hand that was trying to trap him. Boom! Lin Fan's eyes narrowed and his body trembled. His eyes turned pitch black in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the celestial demon body was activated. Facing the yin-yang double evils, Nye Tian had to activate the celestial demon body. Since this was the last battle, there was no need for him to hold back any longer. In the next second, Nye Tian's figure moved like a ray of light. The celestial demon body's aura soared into the sky as he charged forward. He was like a sharp blade that sliced through the darkness. Wherever his figure passed, the yin-yang double evil's chi would be destroyed. The yin-yang double evils saw Nye Tian charging towards them, and their eyes widened in fear. They could feel death looming over them. Die! At this time, Nye Tian let out a low roar and his figure appeared in front of the yin-yang double evils. Both his hands stretched out at the same time. Like two iron chains, they clamped down on the yin-yang double evil's neck. "Kid, you can't." The sudden change of events caused the yin-yang double evils to be extremely shocked. Enduring the intense pain, they struggled to speak. Bang! Bang! However, Nye Tian did not give them the chance to finish their sentence. He exerted force with both his hands and with two muffled sounds, blood splattered in front of him. The yin-yang double evils' heads were crushed by Nye Tian. They died instantly. At this time, the yin-yang double evils' chi that filled the sky dissipated. When the crowd saw the two headless corpses in Nye Tian's hands, their eyes trembled violently. Not only did Nye Tian kill the yin-yang double evils, but he did it in the most direct way. It was too cruel. Nye Tian used an even crueler method to deal with those who were cruel and merciless. Just as the crowd was petrified, Nye Tian suddenly felt something. He exclaimed in surprise and his expression changed. In the next moment, two black vortexes appeared from the yin-yang double evil's corpses. The yin-yang double evil's chi was extremely strong. Chapter 35-45. Yin and Yang. Upon hearing the Ghost Emperor's voice, Nye Tian's eyes flickered with astonishment. Evil essence. He didn't know what evil energy was, but he could feel that the two black vortexes contained an extremely dense evil energy. One yin and one yang, their auras complemented each other. It was incomparably strange. Phew! At that moment, before Nye Tian could react, the two black vortexes swooped down on him and disappeared into his right eye in the blink of an eye. In an instant, a terrifying force surged out from the demon eye and instantly attacked Nye Tian's body, causing him to scream in pain. The intense pain felt like his body was being torn apart bit by bit. Moreover, the evil energy was like ants, biting his body like a raging fire. Nye Tian. The sudden change caused the Ghost Emperor to be stunned for a moment and couldn't help but cry out in fear. He didn't expect that the two evil energies would actually rush into Nye Tian's eyes. What's going on? The crowd trembled when they saw Nye Tian's appearance. They were incomparably shocked and their expressions changed, not knowing what had happened. However, the two evil energies' auras made everyone feel suffocated. It was hard to imagine how painful it would be to have two evil energies rush into Nie Tian's eyes. Nie Tian! Teacher! At this moment two voices resounded. It was Su Kuanga and Duanmu Lu. Their figures moved at the same time and appeared in the sky above the battle arena. Nie Tian had killed the yin-yang twin evils and ended the battle with the sky picking wolf. He had already won. However, when Su Kuanga and Duanmu Lu wanted to approach Nie Tian, they felt an incomparably dense evil energy, preventing them from approaching. There seemed to be an evil energy barrier in the air, preventing anyone from approaching Nie Tian. Teacher! However, Duanmu Lu didn't care at this moment. He let out a low roar and directly rushed forward. Boom! As he approached, a gust of murderous aura suddenly appeared in the void and swept towards him like a storm. Duanmu Lu felt a suffocating pressure, and his expression changed. Danger! Su Kuanga's eyes trembled as he shouted in a low voice. His figure moved as he fiercely thrusted his spear forward. The spear was like a dragon, and wherever the spear's shadow landed, it directly dispersed the evil qi. However, under the impact of the baleful qi, Su Kuanga's figure retreated several hundred meters away. After stabilizing his body, a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. He was unexpectedly injured. That baleful aura was extremely powerful, it could actually directly injure Su Kuanga. Duanmu Lu retreated hastily. His eyes were trembling, and he was momentarily speechless. It was very thrilling just now. If Su Kuanga was a little bit slower, he would have died without a doubt. Even Su Kuanga was injured by that evil qi. If it landed on his body, he would definitely die. Duanmu, don't go near Nie Tian. Su Kuanga looked at Duanmu Lu and shouted. Kuanga, quickly retreat from the battle stage. At this time, Su Cheng's figure appeared and shouted. N. Su Kuanga complied and left the battle stage together with Duanmu Lu. The two of them looked at Nie Tian, their eyes slightly trembling. They didn't know what happened to Nie Tian's body. Lord Wolf King, what happened to Nie Tian? Su Kuanga looked at Su Cheng, hesitated for a moment, and couldn't help but ask. Some kind of power from the yin-yang dual evils seemed to have been absorbed by Nie Tian's eyes. Su Cheng frowned and guessed. He also couldn't understand what happened to Nie Tian's body. If Nie Tian could really directly absorb the power of other warriors, it would be too abnormal. Among the warriors, those who cultivated evil cultivation methods could indeed devour the power of others, but that kind of devouring was extremely limited. Moreover, when devouring, the warriors would also have to pay a corresponding price. At this moment, the two dark vortexes that gushed out from the yin-yang dual evil's body directly merged with Nie Tian. It was too strange. This kid, what happened to him? The crowd looked at Nie Tian, they were horrified and shocked. At this time, Nie Tian looked very terrifying. His whole body was shrouded by a powerful evil qi. His figure could no longer be seen, only a terrifying evil qi vortex could be seen. What was even more frightening was that in that terrible evil qi vortex, two extremely terrifying auras gushed out. It was the power of yin and yang. The two forces collided with each other, causing the void to tremble. Waves of evil qi violently attacked the void. It was as if thousands of demons were wildly dancing. The crowd felt the strong evil qi and couldn't help but retreat. It seemed that the yin-yang evil qi on Nie Tian's body had released an even more terrifying power. At this time, in the center of the evil qi vortex, Nie Tian's body was undergoing a shocking change. To be more precise, his right demonic eye was undergoing some sort of terrifying mutation. At this time, the extreme demon annihilation seal appeared at the corner of his eye again, and it wasn't just one, but three. That's right, 3 extreme demon annihilation seals. Previously, the demon eye only had 1 extreme demon annihilation seal, but now, he had 3 extreme demon annihilation seals. The 3 extreme demon annihilation seals were like 3 frightening black lines that were engraved at the corner of Nietion's eye, making him look incomparably evil. As for his martial body, under the impact of the yin-yang evil qi, it was almost torn apart. The power released by the yin-yang evil qi was extremely terrifying. It made Nietion feel as if his body was being torn apart by thousands of sharp blades. That kind of pain was indescribable. However, at the same time, he felt that the power of his martial body had clearly increased. His entire body was filled with a sense of power. Nietion, hold on. At this time, the Ghost Emperor's worried voice rang out. There was a hint of excitement. Of course, he knew that Nietion's demon eye was currently fusing with the yin-yang evil qi. It was precisely because of the impact of the yin-yang evil qi that Nietion's demon eye had once again awakened the extreme demon annihilation seal. Furthermore, it had directly awakened 2 extreme demon annihilation seals. As long as Nietion could endure it and successfully fuse with the yin-yang evil qi, his strength would have a qualitative leap. Nietion nodded his head. Although the pain in his body almost made him faint, the feeling of his martial body surging with power made him extremely excited. What he needed the most was to increase his strength. As long as he could increase his strength, he could endure even greater pain. Following that, the tearing pain lasted for a full hour. This short period of time made Nietion feel as if a few centuries had passed. Fortunately, after an hour, the intense pain gradually weakened and soon disappeared. The endless evil qi in the void instantly flowed into Nietion's demon eye. The void was clear, as if the baleful aura had never existed. Everyone was flabbergasted by the bizarre change. They looked at Nietion with confused expressions, not knowing what was going on. Could it be that those 2 terrifying black vortexes had been absorbed by Nietion? Nietion's aura was much stronger than before. What was going on? Chapter 3546. Soaring heroic spirit in the wolf slave field, everyone's eyes were focused on Nietion, shocked and puzzled. Very good. At this time, under everyone's gaze, Nietion opened his mouth and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly as he murmured to himself. After more than an hour of torture, he successfully merged the yin and yang evil yuan. At this time, he felt that the power of the demon eye was much stronger than before. More importantly, he had awakened 3 extreme demon annihilation seals, and under the impact of the demon eye's power, his martial body had also been greatly enhanced, becoming even more powerful than before. What made him even more surprised was that his strength had once again broken through from the 2nd level of Heavenly Charm to the 3rd level of Heavenly Charm. A small breakthrough wasn't considered big, but one should know that he had just broken through to the 2nd level of Heavenly Charm not long ago. Breaking through so quickly at the Heavenly Charm realm was simply unimaginable. Nietion, he broke through again. Su Kuanga looked at Nietion with a trembling gaze. The shock in his heart was indescribable. When he fought with Nietion, the latter was only at the 1st level of Heavenly Charm. In less than a month, Nietion actually broke through 2 levels. This speed was really terrifying. The Heavenly Charm realm was the initial stage of the Sage realm. For those who had set foot in the Heavenly Charm realm, it wasn't difficult to break through. But even a genius martial artist would need several years or even decades to break through 1 level. For someone like Nietion to break through 2 levels in a month was too abnormal. At this time, everyone also felt the change in Nietion's aura. Their eyes trembled in shock. Unbelievable, Nietion actually merged the yin and yang evil yuan. Lord Wolf King, is the Sky Wolf Challenge over? At this time, Nietion looked at Su Cheng and asked with a faint smile. It's over. Su Cheng's eyes slightly narrowed as he reacted and nodded. Just now, everyone was shocked by the sudden change. Only now did they realize that the Sky Wolf Challenge was over. No one thought that Nietion would actually succeed in the Sky Wolf Challenge. A second-level Heavenly Charm martial artist defeating so many ninth-level Heavenly Charm martial artists was simply too terrifying. Nie Tian didn't pay attention to the crowd. His figure moved and directly left the stage. He arrived beside Su Cheng and said, "Lord Wolf King, I want to take my friend away." "No problem." Su Cheng glanced at Duanmulu and said with a faint smile. Before challenging the Heavenly Wolf, he had already promised Nie Tian that as long as Nie Tian succeeded, he could take Duanmulu away. Aside from Duanmu, there are 3 other people. Nie Tian's lips twitched as he spoke. Su Cheng stared blankly at Nie Tian. He had only agreed to let Nie Tian take away Duanmulu, not the others. Nie Tian, don't think that you can take away anyone from the wolf slave farm just because you succeeded in challenging the Sky Wolf Challenge. At this moment, another Wolf King took a step forward and stared at Nie Tian with a cold expression. "Every wolf slave here belongs to the wolf slave farm. How can anyone take them away?" Nie Tian looked at the Wolf King and said in a deep voice. The Wolf King was stunned. He didn't understand what Nie Tian was talking about. "Is half of the Sky Wolf Challenge enough?" Nie Tian looked at the Wolf King and said cold. "What did you say?" The Wolf King looked at Nie Tian and suddenly realized something. Its pupils constricted and it asked in shock. He couldn't believe his ears. If he didn't hear wrong, Nie Tian actually wanted to use half of the Sky Wolf Challenge to exchange for the other 3. "I still have 3 friends in the wolf slave farm. I am willing to use half of the Sky Wolf Challenge to exchange for the other 3, Nie Tian said calmly and clearly. His voice wasn't loud, but when it fell on the wolf slave farm, it stunned the hundreds of thousands of people present. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Nie Tian. Their expressions were clearly saying, "Are you crazy? Using half of the Sky Wolf Challenge to exchange for 3 wolf slaves?" In anyone's opinion, this was crazy. The price of the wolf slaves in the wolf slave farm was very high. Even with ordinary strength and talent, it would cost hundreds or even thousands of top-grade Saint crystals. However, the Heavenly Wolf stakes accumulated by the Heavenly Wolf Challenge this time around was unimaginably high. At this time, the Sky Wolf Challenge had already been calculated. There were more than 60 million top-grade Saint crystals. In addition, there were countless Saint pills, sacred arrays, sacred artifacts, martial arts, martial skills, and many other things. When everything was added up, it was probably comparable to the Chamber of Commerce in 7th Cultivator Sacred World. Even the 7 Cultivator Sacred World's branch of 8 Paths Chamber of Commerce would find it difficult to come up with so much money at once. But Nie Tian actually wanted to use half of the Sky Wolf Challenge to exchange for 3 wolf slaves. If this wasn't crazy, then what was? Just 30 million top-grade Saint crystals was enough to buy tens of thousands of wolf slaves from the wolf slave farm. Nie Tian, are you kidding me? After a few seconds of stunned silence, the wolf slave reacted and asked with blazing eyes. He was the Wolf King, but in the face of so much wealth, he couldn't help feeling a little nervous. "Do I look like I'm joking?" Nie Tian's face was gloomy as he glanced over at the Wolf King before turning to Su Cheng and saying, "Sir Wolf King, please return those people to me." Su Cheng's eyes flickered and he nodded. Even he was shocked at this moment. It had to be said that Nie Tian was truly heroic, offering half of the Sky Wolf Challenge as soon as he opened his mouth. The most important thing was that Nie Tian remained calm, as if money was nothing more than waste paper to him. When a cultivator's strength reached a certain level, the temptation for money would become less and less, but once the amount of money reached a certain level, it would still tempt masters. Nie Tian, however, was different from the others and was not tempted at all. His strength was not strong, but having such a mentality was enough to show that his goal was very high, so high that he didn't care about the Sky Wolf Challenge at all. In Nie Tian's eyes, no amount of money meant anything. The most important thing was that Duanmulu and the others were alive. However, He directly offered half of the Sky Wolf challenge to thank Su Ching for his help. If not for the latter, he would not have been able to rescue them so smoothly. A moment later, the people from the wolf slave farm brought Yang Zixiao, Han Tian, and Peng Xiongfei over. "Teacher!" When the three saw Nie Tian, they trembled and called out in unison. "It's all right." Nie Tian faintly smiled. His divine sense swept over the three's bodies and confirmed that they were all right. Only then did he feel a lot more relieved. Next, Nie Tian did not stay any longer. After the people from the wolf slave farm returned the other half of the Sky Wolf challenge to him, he and Su Kuanga left with Duanmu Lu and the others. Everyone's eyes watched as Nie Tian and the others left. The shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. Nie Tian's performance in challenging the Sky Wolf challenge was enough to shock everyone. After today, the name Nie Tian would spread throughout the entire Seven Cultivators' sacred world. Chapter 35-47. Chapter 35-42. Chapter 352. Night Wolf Holy Flame. After Nie Tian and the others left the wolf slave field, they quickly returned to the restaurant. Duanmu Lu and the others had suffered a bit this time, but fortunately nothing happened. This experience was not entirely a bad thing for them. Nie Tian let Duanmu Lu and the others enter the 9 extremes to rest, and gave them the heavenly wolf bet, so that they could find something suitable for them. Although half of the heavenly wolf bet was divided by the wolf slave field, it was still too much. Nie Tian did not have time to check them one by one. Inside the room, Nie Tian and Su Kuanga stood side by side. "Nie Tian, are you all right?" Su Kuanga looked at Nie Tian and could not help but worry. After all, Nie Tian had absorbed the yin and yang evil qi. He did not know if it would affect his martial body. "I'm fine." Nie Tian smiled faintly. His current state was better than before, and his strength was also stronger than before. The yin and yang evil qi was absorbed and fused by the devil eye, which directly stimulated the devil eye to awaken 2 extreme devil exterminating seal. It did not cause any burden to Nie Tian. It seemed that the yin and yang evil qi was directly swallowed and absorbed by the devil eye. "This time, thank you very much." Nie Tian looked at Su Kuanga, smiled faintly, and nodded to express his thanks. This time, it was indeed thanks to Su Kuanga and Su Ching that they were able to rescue Duanmu Lu and the others. Especially Su Ching. If it were not for him, it would have been almost impossible to rescue Duanmu Lu and the others. In fact, Nie Tian was very curious about the relationship between Su Ching and Su Kuanga. Su Kuanga nodded slightly, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Su Ching is my second uncle." "Second uncle?" Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and he was stunned for a moment. "Yes." Su Kuanga nodded and said, "Su Ching was originally a wolf slave in the wolf slave field. My grandfather saved him from the wolf slave field, accepted him as his adopted son, and let him enter the Su family. But 3 years ago, he left the Su family, and now he has nothing to do with the Su family." Nie Tian's expression changed. He didn't expect Su Ching to have such a relationship with the Su family. He also did not expect that Su Ching was once a wolf slave. He could not help but be curious about what had happened back then for Su Ching to leave the Su family and become the Wolf King of the Evil Moon Sky Wolf tribe. "I don't know what happened either." At this time, Su Kuanga's complexion couldn't help but change as he said in a deep voice, "I only know that a big event happened in the Su family that year. Grandfather and second uncle were escorting something, but grandfather died mysteriously. After that, second uncle left the Su family and became the Wolf King of the Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf." When Nie Tian heard Su Kuanga's words, he couldn't help but frown and his complexion changed again. Everyone in the family said that it was second uncle who killed grandpa. Because of this, he left the Su family and became the Wolf King of the Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf tribe. Su Kuanga continued. His face was gloomy and full of pain. Eyebrows furrowed, Nie Tian asked in a grim voice, Do you believe that? He and Su Qing had only met a few times, but he could see that Su Qing was not an ungrateful person. The impression that Su Qing gave Nie Tian could be summed up in 2 words: perseverance and patience. Nie Tian had deliberately looked at Su Qing's eyes, as if hiding a very deep secret. I don't know. Su Kuanga shook his head. He really didn't know whether to believe in the Su family or Su Qing. Some things you can't just look at the surface, you have to believe in your own judgment. Nie Tian slightly nodded and said while looking at Su Kuanga. He knew that Su Kuanga believed in Su Qing, otherwise he wouldn't have asked Wenren Xiang to look for Su Qing. However, Su Qing was now the Wolf King of the Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf tribe, which made Su Kuanga very confused. Su Kuanga nodded and calmed down after a while. Nie Tian, will you participate in the Wolf Night battle? At this time, Su Kuanga suddenly asked. Nie Tian nodded. His purpose in coming to the Wolf Night Mountain was to find the Emperor of the Underworld. Perhaps through the Wolf Night battle, he could understand the Evil Moon Heavenly Wolf better. I look forward to fighting with you. Su Kuanga faintly smiled, his eyes flashing with a sharp light. Although he had been defeated by Nie Tian, and had already seen Nie Tian's strength when he challenged the Heavenly Wolf, he still had a spirit in his heart. He hoped to fight with Nie Tian again. Even if he lost, he wouldn't regret it. I also look forward to it. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he lightly said. The last time he defeated Su Kuanga, there was actually a certain element of luck, and he knew that the last battle was not the limit of Su Kuanga's strength. Then let's meet at the Wolf Night battle. Su Kuanga laughed, then without staying, he bid farewell and left. Before leaving, Su Kuanga warned Nie Tian not to leave the Wolf Night City as much as possible. When Nie Tian challenged the Heavenly Wolf, he killed a lot of people and offended a lot of powerhouses. He was afraid that he had already been targeted. If he left the Wolf Night City, he would definitely be in danger. Nie Tian nodded with a smile. Before finding the Emperor of the Underworld, he had no intention of leaving the Wolf Night City. After Su Kuanga left, Nie Tian was alone in the room, preparing to thoroughly check his martial body. At this time, a figure appeared. Wenren Xiang. Nie Tian saw Wenren Xiang and couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. Wenren Xiang went to find Su Qing, but she didn't appear together with him. This made Nie Tian somewhat worried, but he didn't expect her to appear at this time. Congratulations! Wenren Xiang looked at Nie Tian, faintly smiled and said, You succeeded in challenging the Heavenly Wolf. You are already a legend in the 7th cultivator of true virtue. I was just lucky. Nie Tian smiled bitterly, he didn't want to be so famous. This kind of fame wouldn't bring him any substantial help, but would instead bring him unnecessary trouble. Wenren Xiang, where did you go? At this time, Nie Tian suddenly noticed that Wenren Xiang's aura was a bit unstable, as if she had just experienced a battle. I went to the Night Wolf Valley. Wenren Xiang slightly frowned and said with an ugly expression. What for? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he asked. Wenren Xiang's beautiful eyes slightly trembled as she explained. I asked Lord Su Qing how to break the forest wolf curse. He told me that there is a holy grass in the Night Wolf Valley called the Night Wolf Holy Flame. After consuming it, it can temporarily suppress the forest wolf curse. Night Wolf Holy Flame. Did you get it? Nie Tian frowned and asked. No. Wenren Xiang's expression sank as she shook her head. When I went to the Night Wolf Valley, the entire valley was surrounded by a pack of blood flame mystical wolves. I couldn't get close at all. Nie Tian's eyes slightly narrowed. It seemed that Wenren Xiang had just fought with the blood flame mystical wolves, no wonder her aura was a bit unstable. Rest for a while, I will go with you to the Night Wolf Valley. Nie Tian frowned and lightly said. Okay. Wenren Xiang nodded her head gratefully, then returned to her room to rest. Nie Tian, it's not a wise decision for you to leave the city now. At this time, the Ghost Emperor's voice resounded. You just killed so many people. I wonder how many people are watching you now. I will be careful. Nye Tian smiled and lightly said. Chapter 35-48. Again in the room, Nye Tian started to check his martial body. He was now in the third stage of heaven rhythm. His martial body was much stronger after merging with the yin and yang evil qi. His bones and meridians were much more terrifying than before. However, he didn't open the remaining 3 limit. At that moment, Nye Tian's pupils constricted as he suddenly discovered that the 9 life meridians in his fate grid space were much stronger than before. They seemed to be even more robust and full of power. At that moment, the Ghost Emperor's surprised voice echoed out. Nye Tian, your 9 life meridians have become even stronger. Nye Tian nodded, overjoyed. Yeah. The growth of his life meridians had exceeded his expectations. The Ghost Emperor seemed very excited as he said, Nye Tian, your life meridians have already reached the middle stage. This speed is much faster than I expected. The heavenly beacon life incantation is indeed terrifying. Nye Tian had only merged with the heaven beacon fate art for a month and he had already reached the middle stage of life meridians. Nye Tian's life meridians were strong, but without the help of a powerful fate art, it would be impossible for him to have such terrifying growth. Yes. Nye Tian nodded slightly, feeling very excited. The Heaven's Beacon life incantation had indeed helped him a lot. The reason why he had such terrifying strength was closely related to his 9 life meridians. Although the life veins did not help him directly, he could feel that the existence of the 9 life veins had made his martial body much stronger. Half a day later, Nye Tian and Wenren Xiang left the restaurant and headed for the Night Wolf Valley. Before leaving, Nye Tian changed his aura and his appearance. He didn't want to be hunted down as soon as he left the Night Wolf City. The two soon left the Night Wolf City. Nye Tian was very careful. He sensed his surroundings and was relieved that no one was following them. Wenren Xiang, we need to hurry. If someone discovers that I'm not here, it'll be troublesome, Nye Tian said in a deep voice. He could not help but feel nervous. When he walked out of the restaurant, he discovered that there were several powerful auras hiding in the surroundings. It was obvious that they were the people who were watching him. These people didn't realize that Nye Tian had already left the restaurant. However, he could not hide this for long, so Nye Tian had to hurry. After retrieving the Night Wolf Holy Flame, he would immediately return to the city. In Wolf Night City, he was still safe. No matter how insolent those powerhouses were, they didn't dare to behave atrociously in Wolf Night City. Nye Tian and Wenren Xiang moved very fast. About half an hour later, they arrived at a valley. It's here. Wenren Xiang looked at the valley before her and said in a deep voice. Nye Tian narrowed his eyes. He saw that the entire valley was surrounded by dozens of giant wolves. Each of these giant wolves was over 100 meters long. Their bodies were pitch black, but there were crimson runes surging around their bodies. From afar, they looked like flames. These giant wolves were the Blood Flame Mystic Wolves that Wenren Xiang had mentioned. These Blood Flame Mystic Wolves were already here before I came. I have no idea why. Wenren Xiang frowned as she looked at the Blood Flame Mystic Wolves. If it weren't for these giant wolves, she would have already obtained the Night Wolf Holy Flame. Nye Tian frowned as he looked at the Blood Flame Mystic Wolves. He quickly discovered something strange and couldn't help but exclaim. Although these Blood Flame Mystic Wolves had surrounded the entire valley, they did not enter the valley. It was as if they were attracted by some kind of aura in the valley, but they were also afraid of some kind of power in the valley. Wait here. I'll go take a look. Nye Tian glanced at Wenren Xiang and said indifferently. Be careful. Wenren Xiang nodded slightly. She couldn't help but feel nervous. Nye Tian smiled and immediately moved. He was like a ray of light as he flew towards the Night Wolf Valley. Roar! Just as Nye Tian was about to land on the ground, the Blood Flame Xian wolves were alarmed and let out low howls one after another. In the next moment, several of them leaped into the air, the blood-colored flames on their bodies growing more violent. In the next moment, they unleashed a terrifying wave of blood-colored flame power that pressed down on Nietian like a sea of flames. Nietian frowned. Starlight Heavenly Slash appeared in his hand and he slashed out. The sword whistled like a dragon and forcefully pushed the Blood Flame Mystic Wolves away. The Blood Flame Mystic Wolves were second-rank holy beasts. When they reached adulthood, they could pose a threat to a 9th-level Heavenly Charm Cultivator. However, they were not a threat to Nietian. The instant Nietian attacked with his sword, he suddenly felt a strange aura coming from the valley, and his expression couldn't help but change. He was extremely shocked. That aura was extremely strange. It seemed to be a type of sword intent, but it was different from any sword intent that Nietian had seen before. What shocked Nietian even more was that he felt an indescribable resonance with that aura. This feeling reminded him of the heaven-punishing demonic chi that he had encountered before entering the Wolf's Night City. However, this aura was completely different from the heaven-punishing demonic chi. It definitely didn't originate from the heaven-punishing demonic heart, but it resonated with a certain power in his body. Roar, roar, roar. Just as Nietian was feeling puzzled, several blood flame mystic wolves roared and pounced at him. Nietian, watch out! Upon seeing this, Wenren Xiang's beautiful eyes trembled, and she cried out in alarm. Get lost! Nietian's eyes darkened. He let out a low roar and swept his sword. The sword intent was like a raging wave that sent the blood flame mystic wolves flying. The blood flame mystic wolves howled in pain, but they didn't die. Little bastard, your skin is pretty thick. Nietian's lips twitched as he coldly laughed. The blood flame mystic wolves actually didn't die after taking a direct hit from him. This showed how strong their bodies were. No wonder Wenren Xiang couldn't do anything to them. Roar! The blood flame mystic wolves roared, baring their fangs as they stared at Nietian. However, they were clearly afraid and didn't dare to get close to Nietian. Boom! At this moment, a terrifying sword intent gushed forth from Nietian's body, intimidating the pack of wolves. After which, a pair of astral wings appeared on his back as he shot into the Night Wolf Valley like a shooting star. He didn't want to waste time with the blood flame mystic wolves. He wanted to obtain the Night Wolf holy flames and leave immediately. However, the instant he entered the Night Wolf Valley, he suddenly felt a terrifying aura, causing him to frown as his countenance changed. Scram! In the next instant, a low roar rang out from within the valley. After which, a terrifying sword intent appeared, soaring through the air, exuding an incomparable killing intent. Nietian's eyebrows furrowed as his expression flickered with shock. That sword intent was extremely terrifying, causing him to feel a fatal threat. Boom! In the blink of an eye, Nietian reacted. His astral heaven slash abruptly pierced out, forcibly blocking the sword intent in the air. However, he was forced to retreat a few hundred meters, directly out of the Night Wolf Valley. How can this be? Nietian stabilized his body. His eyes were filled with shock and bewilderment. What he was shocked about wasn't the strength of the attacker, but the fact that he could feel the heart of the sky. Chapter 3549. Chapter 3544. Chapter 354 The Madness of the Wolves, Resonance of the Sky. Outside of the Valley of Night Wolves, Nietian steadied himself. His eyes quivered in shock. He had never expected that the sword that had suddenly appeared in the valley would resonate with the heart of Haotian in his body again. Just like the last time in the valley, Nietian could clearly feel the presence of the heart of the sky. What was different was that he did not feel any discomfort. Instead, he felt that the heart of the sky was releasing an enormous amount of power. It was like some kind of talisman that was tempering his martial body. What is going on? Nietian's eyes quivered. He was confused and shocked. What was inside the Valley of Night Wolves that could cause the heart of the sky to resonate again? "Nie Tian, are you alright?" When Ren Xiang saw from afar that Nie Tian had been thrown out by a force, her eyes quivered and she asked, "I am fine. Don't come over." Nie Tian responded and quickly calmed down. His eyes were shining as he stared at the valley before him. The force of the sword just now was so powerful that it made him fearful. He really wanted to know who was inside the valley. "You outside, if you dare to take another step into the valley, I will kill you." Just then, a low and domineering voice came from the valley. At the same time, an even more powerful force of the sword rolled out like a tidal wave. Nie Tian frowned and his expression flickered as he hastily retreated. He felt that the person's qi was stronger than before. It was as if he was awakening some kind of terrifying power. Could it be that he's in secluded cultivation? Nie Tian frowned and his face darkened. He guessed that the person inside the valley was in isolation. Just then, an even more terrifying force of the sword came from the valley. It was majestic and vast. It shot through the clouds as if it was going to envelop the entire world. What a terrifying force of the sword! Nie Tian frowned and retreated again. Perhaps that person is in a critical stage of seclusion. "I'll wait outside the valley," he murmured as he steadied himself. He sensed that the cultivator in the valley was at a critical stage of breaking through. If he rashly entered and disturbed that person, it would not be good. Although the cultivator in the valley was very tyrannical and had a heavy killing qi, Nie Tian still felt that it was best not to startle this person. After all, it was the other party who had entered the valley first. It would not be good for him to force his way in. Boom! 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 At this time, the valley was constantly emitting terrifying sword momentum, forming sword-intent fluctuations in the air like ripples, stirring the void endlessly. Nie Tian, what happened? When Ren Xiang's eyes trembled as she looked at Nie Tian and shouted, "Don't come any closer." Nie Tian didn't explain anything and only responded loudly. When Ren Xiang's beautiful brows knit together tightly as she sensed the fluctuation of sword will in the air, and she couldn't help but retreat. At that moment, Nie Tian suddenly felt that the heart of the sky in his body was becoming more and more active. It was even a little restless, as if it had sensed some kind of special force and was greatly stimulated. "What's going on?" Nie Tian's eyes trembled as he tried to calm the heart of the sky down. However, the more he tried to control it, the more violent the heart of the sky became. The shocking fluctuations made him feel like his entire body was on fire. Roar, roar, roar! At that moment, the blood-flame mystic wolves around him began to growl and became restless. Their auras were extremely violent. Nie Tian's expression darkened as he had a bad feeling about this. Howl! At that moment, a giant blood-flame mystic wolf suddenly let out a long howl, causing the entire valley to shake. Wolf King! Nie Tian's eyes trembled as he stared at the blood-flame mystic wolf that was 400 to 500 meters long. It was obvious that this wolf was the Wolf King. It was howling as if it was commanding the pack of wolves. Boom! 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 In the next moment, a shocking scene occurred. 40 to 50 blood-flame mystic wolves were burning with blood-like flames as they charged into the air. It was a terrifying scene. Nie Tian frowned as his expression changed. He had no idea what was going on. Oh no! Are these blood-flame mystic wolves crazy? They're actually burning their blood qi. The Ghost Emperor's voice was extremely shocked. Burning their blood qi? Nie Tian's eyes flickered when he heard the Ghost Emperor's words. He was quite surprised. He only knew that warriors could burn their blood qi in the face of danger. He had never heard that beasts could burn their blood qi as well. What are these blood-flame mystic wolves trying to do by burning their blood qi? In the next moment, the Ghost Emperor's panicked voice rang out. Nie Tian, hurry up and get out of here. These blood-flame mystic wolves have already gone crazy. After they ignite their blood qi, their bodies will become several times stronger, enough to pose a threat to the Revelation Saint Master. The blood flame mystic wolves were different from ordinary sacred beasts. After they burned their blood chi, they would be able to unleash their strongest power. However, after that, their life force would be exhausted and they would eventually die. The Wolf King's howl had actually made the blood flame mystic wolves burn their blood chi. Just what was in the valley that would make the Wolf King do such a crazy thing? Sure. Nye Tian nodded vigorously and then backed away. He could already sense that the wolves were much stronger than before. It wasn't a wise move to stay here at a time like this. Roar, roar, roar. At that moment, the wolves let out low growls and charged toward the valley in unison. Whoosh! However, at that moment, a stream of sword chi shot out from the valley like a flowing light blade. It cut the blood flame mystic wolf at the very front in half. The sky was covered in blood. The horrifying scene made Nye Tian's heart tremble. The person in the valley was too strong. A stream of sword chi could actually be so powerful. However, the blood flame mystic wolves had already gone crazy. They didn't care about anything else and continued charging toward the valley. Nye Tian retreated 10,000 meters and saw several blood flame mystic wolves charging into the valley. Bang, bang, bang. Then, dull sounds came from the valley. It was obvious that the cultivator had already started fighting with the blood flame mystic wolves. Nye Tian felt that the cultivator was strong enough to fight against the berserk blood flame mystic wolves. Damn it! Don't let the blood flame mystic wolves enter the valley. But at that moment a low growl came from the valley. It seemed that the cultivator was injured. Nye Tian frowned and his expression changed slightly. The cultivator was at a critical stage of breaking through. If he was disturbed by the blood flame mystic wolves now, he might be in danger of going berserk. Chapter 3550. Strange changes in the sky, kill. Nye Tian roared in midair and slashed out with the starry sky slash. The sword's shadow was like a roaring dragon, slashing toward a blood flame wolf. Bang! The instant the sword's shadow landed, a terrifying sword will erupted with astonishing power, directly blasting the blood flame mysterious wolf into pieces. The bloody scene caused Nye Tian to frown and go blank for a moment. He did not expect that the power of his sword would be so strong. Boom! At this moment, he felt the heart of the sky in his body suddenly vibrate. A terrifying sword will rushed out and surged in his body. The sword will made him feel as if his power was about to explode. Could the increase of my sword will have something to do with the heart of the sky? Nye Tian frowned and guessed. Roar. However, at that moment, the blood flame Xian wolves in the surroundings seemed to have been enraged by Nye Tian. They let out low growls and charged towards Nye Tian like moving volcanoes, wreathed in raging blood-colored flames. Come on! Nye Tian's eyes narrowed and his lips curled into a cold smile. He roared and slashed out with the starry sky slash. A terrifying sword will burst out like a stormy sea. The sword radiance surged for tens of thousands of meters and blasted toward the blood flame wolves. Boom! 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 In the next moment, the sword's shadow fell and several dull thuds were heard. Rays of bloody light were blinding and dyed half the sky red. It was a tragic scene. Several blood flame mystic wolves couldn't withstand Nye Tian's sword shadows at all, and were instantly killed. Nye Tian's eyes flickered with the light of astonishment. Even he didn't expect that his sword would be so powerful. How is this possible? At the same time, the Ghost Emperor's eyes trembled and he shouted in shock. He couldn't believe that Nye Tian's sword could be so powerful. What was going on? Nye Tian seemed to have become several times stronger. One had to know that a bloody flame mystic wolf that was burning its blood chi had the strength of a heavenly mandate Saint Master. However, before Nye Tian's sword, the blood flame mystic wolves were like clay chickens and pottery dogs. They couldn't resist at all. Could it be the heart of the sky? The Ghost Emperor's eyes trembled as he exclaimed in his heart. He also sensed that Nietion's heart of the sky had become unusually violent, as if it had sensed some kind of power. However, the Ghost Emperor did not understand why the heart of the sky would become agitated at this time. He didn't know much about the heart of the sky, but he had sensed the heart of the sky before. He was very sure that the heart of the sky contained an abnormally terrifying power that even he couldn't imagine. "I'll kill you all." At this moment, Nietion's eyes dimmed slightly. His entire body's sword aura suddenly burst out, rushing into the void, making him look like a huge sword, peerlessly domineering, incomparable. Wenren Xiang's eyes trembled when she saw this scene from afar. Her pretty face was filled with astonishment. Even though she was more than 100,000 meters away from Nietion, she could clearly sense the terrifying aura from Nietion's body. She couldn't believe that Nietion had become so strong. He was like a completely different person from 10 days ago. Hovering in midair, a cold smile appeared at the corner of Nietion's mouth as he shot through the air like a streak of light. Bang! Bang! Wherever he passed, a series of muffled sounds could be heard. The sky was filled with bloody light. In just the blink of an eye, more than 10 blood-flame mystic wolves were all slaughtered by Nietion. Wenren Xiang's eyes trembled as she witnessed this scene from afar. She was completely petrified. She didn't dare to guess Nietion's strength anymore. Every time she thought that Nietion had reached his limit, Nietion would always display even more terrifying strength. Roar! At this time, only the Wolf King was still alive. Its eyes were as dark as the night, and its entire body was covered in bloody flames. It let out a low growl, incomparably violent. "Come." Nietion looked at the Wolf King, the corner of his mouth twitching into a faint smile. Roar! The Wolf King seemed to understand Nietion's provocation. It let out a ferocious howl, and its entire body was engulfed in bloody flames. Its gigantic body was like a fireball as it charged towards Nietion. 9 limits of the starry sky, slash of the heavens. Nietion's lips curled into a cold smile. The starry sky slash arced across the sky. Sword rays fell like a waterfall, aiming to kill the Wolf King. Boom! However, at this moment, Nietion suddenly felt a terrifying force being unleashed by the heart of the sky. It instantly transformed into a whirlpool, imprisoning the sword intent in his body. The sudden change caused his face to darken, and he cried out in shock. Swish! However, at this moment, the Wolf King had already arrived. Its claws slashed downwards as a blood-colored ray of light tore through the air, aiming to kill Nietion. At this moment of life and death, Nietion's eyes flickered. A pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back as he instantly moved. Pooh! Although he had reacted immediately, it was a pity that he was still a step too late. The blood-colored light fell and directly hit his chest. Immediately, a bloody wound appeared, reaching deep into his bones. Even his sternum had several cracks. Nietion's silhouette was flung through the air, leaving a bloody trail in the air. Huff! He forcibly endured the pain as the astral soul wings on his back fluttered, stabilizing his body. However, the wound on his chest was too large, causing his entire body to be dyed red. His countenance instantly turned as white as paper. Nietion! Wenren Xiang's beautiful eyes trembled as she screamed in fear. After which, her silhouette flickered as she dashed towards Nietion. Retreat! But at this moment, Nietion roared in a low voice, not allowing Wenren Xiang to get close to him. Wenren Xiang's silhouette abruptly froze in midair. Roar! At this moment, the Wolf King howled in a low voice as its gigantic body bore down on Nietion. The terrifying blood-colored flames in the air transformed into a sea of fire, pressing down on Nietion. Swish! However, in the next instant, the air trembled as a black ray of light whistled through the air, piercing through the Wolf King's body. The Wolf King's gigantic body abruptly turned sluggish, after which, like a gigantic boulder, it plummeted straight towards the ground. Wenren Xiang frowned, unsure of what just happened. At the same time, the demonic destructive seal on Nie Tian's right eye disappeared and his eyes returned to normal. At this critical moment, he used the demonic destructive seal to kill the Wolf King. He barely managed to stabilize himself. His face was full of shock. At this moment, he was not paying attention to the wound on his body. All his attention was focused on the heart of the sky. Just now, when the Wolf King charged at him, the heart of the sky suddenly transformed into a whirlpool of sword energy that trapped his sword energy. Because of this, he almost died in the hands of the Wolf King. Nie Tian wanted to find out what exactly happened to the heart of the sky. He sensed the heart of the sky and was completely stunned. He saw that the heart of the sky was like a whirlpool, spinning at an insane speed. The sword energy within it intensified. Chapter 35-51. The Sword of the Sky. How is this possible? Nie Tian could not believe the heart of the sky's transformation. Meanwhile, the heart of the sky was spinning wildly. The aura of the sword intent grew stronger as a sword embryo slowly took shape and became clearer. Nie Tian was shocked. He could not understand why the heart of the sky would change like this. The Ghost Emperor's expression changed too. He was utterly shocked. He had no idea what was going on. However, he was more aware of the change in the aura of the heart of the sky than Nie Tian. Just now, the heart of the sky seemed to have been stimulated by a force. It resonated with the force and began to change. The person in the valley. The Ghost Emperor forced himself to calm down and growled in his heart. The force that had stimulated the heart of the sky had come from the valley. Without a doubt, it was the person in the valley that had caused the change in Nie Tian's heart of the sky. Boom! At that moment, Nie Tian suddenly felt the heart of the sky unleashing a terrifying sword intent. It surged into his martial body like a torrent. At that moment, he felt like his body was being torn apart. It was as if every meridian, every piece of bone, and every inch of flesh was filled with a terrifying sword intent. The sudden change caused Nie Tian's expression to change. He raised his head and looked into the valley. At this moment, he sensed that there was also an aura in the valley that was spreading wildly. The aura was completely different from the heart of the sky, but it gave Nie Tian a feeling that it came from the same source. It was as if the aura came from the same source as the heart of the sky, but it had a different aura. What's going on? Nie Tian frowned, completely confused. Following this, the heart of the sky became more and more violent. The terrifying sword intent filled Nie Tian's martial body, as if it was trying to refine his martial body again. What a terrifying sword intent! Wenren Xiang looked at Nie Tian from afar, and she sensed the sword insight fluctuations that ceaselessly came from the latter's body, causing the shock in her heart to be unable to increase any further. She felt that the aura of the sword intent made her have an impulse to prostrate herself in worship. It was as if that sword will could only be possessed by peerless emperors of swords. Wenren Xiang's beautiful eyes trembled incessantly. She had no idea what had happened to Nie Tian. Sky sword. At this moment, Nie Tian's eyes suddenly trembled as he muttered. He saw that the heart of the sky had completely turned into a sword, and he subconsciously knew that this sword was the sword of the sky. The heart of the sky had turned into a sword. What was going on? Following that, Nie Tian could feel the sword intent in his body growing weaker and weaker before returning to normal. However, the shock in his heart could not be any greater. The sky sword seemed to exist in another space, suspended in midair, releasing a terrifying aura of sword will. It was as if the entire sky would shatter if the sword moved. Nie Tian was stunned for a few seconds before he finally reacted. His eyes trembled as he tried to control the sword of the sky. He could vaguely feel that there was some kind of connection between him and the sword of the sky, but this connection was not strong enough. His mind was focused, and he kept trying. Soon, beads of sweat the size of beans appeared on his forehead. The heart of the sky had turned into the sword of the sky. If Nye Tian could not control the sword of the sky, wouldn't it be ridiculous? At this moment, Nye Tian growled and forcibly injected a strand of divine sense into the sword of the sky. Come out! Boom! In the next instant, the sword of the sky trembled and actually came out, floating in front of Nye Tian. Nye Tian's eyes flickered with excitement as he stared at the sharp sword in front of him. The sword of the sky hovered in the air. Although it was not big, it released an extremely terrifying aura, as if the entire sky and earth were about to bow down before the sword of the sky. Nye Tian took a deep breath to calm himself down before reaching out to grab the sword of the sky. But at this time, he felt that there was an invisible force around the clear sky sword that was blocking him, making him unable to approach. He unleashed all his strength and reached out his hand. He finally broke through the barrier of the sword of the sky and grabbed the sword of the sky tightly. Boom! At that moment, a terrifying sword aura was released from the sword of the sky. It shot into the sky, causing the void to tremble and the weather to change. Bang! Wenren Xiang's eyes flickered as she suddenly felt a wave of sword aura. Before she could react, she was sent flying by the impact. Luckily, she was quite a distance away from Nye Tian, so she did not suffer any serious injuries. After she stabilized her body, she stared at Nye Tian from afar. Her face froze. Nye Tian held the sky in his hand as the sword aura around him shot into the sky. It was as if a sword god had descended to the mortal realm. At this moment, Nye Tian was like the ruler of heaven and earth, controlling everything in the world. Nye Tian held the sword of the sky in his hand. He felt the sword intent in his body being stimulated by some kind of power, causing it to skyrocket. This feeling of power exploding made him very excited. However, this feeling did not last for long. It quickly disappeared. At the same time, the sword of the sky returned to normal. At first glance, it did not look too different from an ordinary sword. Nye Tian held the sword of the sky in his hand. With a thought, the sword of the sky returned to the space in the sky. He did not know what the other space was, so he called it the space in the sky for now. The sword of the sky was like Nye Tian's sword of primordial spirit. It moved according to his thoughts, and it was very smooth. More importantly, when Nye Tian held the sword of the sky in his hand, the sword intent in his body would become unusually active. It was very strange. Nye Tian's face was full of excitement, but he had no idea what was going on. In the next moment, he suddenly realized that his sword Dao had a miraculous breakthrough. He had reached the third heaven of sword aura. Third heaven of sword aura. Nye Tian looked excited and shocked. He was only at the first heaven of sword aura before. He did not expect it to increase by 2 realms. He calmed down and murmured, "When I held the sword of the sky, the sword intent in my body must have been stimulated and made a breakthrough." The moment he held the sword of the sky, he felt the sword intent skyrocket. He did not expect it to make a breakthrough in his sword Dao. The power of the sword of the sky was indeed extraordinary. "Who are you?" However, at this moment, a deep voice suddenly came from the valley. Then, a martial artist in black stepped out, causing the surrounding void to tremble. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. He looked up at the martial artist in black in front of him, and his expression changed. Chapter 35:52. Chapter 35:47. Chapter 35:47 Bodhi Buddha Heart. This person's strength is terrifying. Nye Tian looked at the black-clothed martial artist's eyes and couldn't help but tremble. He sensed an aura even more terrifying than Su Kuanga, Yin Liujie, and the others. This black-clothed martial artist's aura was even more terrifying than the yin-yang double evils. But how was this possible? This person was clearly only at the 5th stage of Heaven Yun. Monster. At the same time, the Ghost Emperor's voice rang out in horror. The Ghost Emperor had extremely high requirements for geniuses. he saw this black-clothed martial artist and was able to call him a monster. This showed how strong this black-clothed martial artist was. The black-clothed martial artist's appearance was also very young. He seemed to be around the same age as Su Kuanga, or even younger. However, the black-clothed martial artist's eyes were very strange and pale. He was actually blind. "Who are you?" At this time, the black-clothed martial artist spoke again. Although he was blind, he seemed to be able to see Nie Tian. It even made Nie Tian feel that a pair of eyes were staring at him. "My name is Nie Tian. I came to Night Wolf Valley to find the Night Wolf Holy Flame." Nie Tian frowned and said lightly. He didn't want to be enemies with the black-clothed martial artist, so he answered truthfully. He knew that the sword aura that came from the valley just now was from the black-clothed martial artist. "Is that all?" the black-clothed martial artist said cold, as if he didn't believe Nie Tian. "That's all." Nie Tian responded with a faint smile. He was very calm. "Then how did you activate the sky sword?" Then, the black-clothed martial artist's face sank and said in a deep voice. At this moment, a murderous intent surged from his body. Nie Tian's eyes trembled and he was surprised. Then, his face sank and he asked, "How do you know about the sky sword?" The sky sword had just appeared and only Nie Tian knew about it. How did this black-clothed martial artist know about it? "You really activated the sky sword?" The black-clothed cultivator's pupils shrank slightly as he said in shock. Nie Tian frowned. Only now did he understand that the black-clothed cultivator was bluffing him. However, it was very unusual that the black-clothed martial artist knew about the sky sword. "So what?" Nie Tian's expression darkened as he asked again, "How do you know about the heaven sword?" The black-clothed cultivator was stunned for a moment. After a long time, he came to his senses. Like a madman, he laughed loudly and said, "How laughable! I, the Bodhi seed, spent a lot of effort to activate the Bodhi pearl. Unexpectedly, someone managed to activate the sky sword so easily." "Bodhi bead? Sky sword?" When Nie Tian heard the words of the black-clad cultivator, who called himself the Bodhi seed, he could not help but feel even more confused. He did not know what the black-clad cultivator was talking about. Until now, he still hadn't figured out what was going on. "Nie Tian, why do you think your sky sword appeared?" After a while, the Bodhi seed calmed down and said, "That's because your heart of the sky and my Bodhi Buddha heart resonated. My Bodhi Buddha heart activated the Bodhi pearl, while your heart of the sky activated the sky sword." Bodhi Buddha heart. When Nie Tian heard these words, his eyes could not help but tremble as he cried out in surprise. It turned out that the Bodhi pearl in the Bodhi seed's mouth was born from the Bodhi Buddha heart. The resonance he had felt with the heart of the sky originated from the Bodhi Buddha heart. However, he did not know what the Bodhi Buddha heart was. It seems that you do not know what the heart of the sky is. Although the Bodhi seed was blind, he could see Nie Tian's every move. He sneered and said, "The heart of the sky actually has such an ignorant master. How sad." Nie Tian frowned but did not say anything. At this time, he suddenly remembered something else. When he had entered the canyon of Wolf's Night City, the heart of the sky had also resonated with the sky-punishing demonic chi. Of course, he knew that the sky-punishing demonic chi came from the sky-punishing demonic chi. Therefore, the heart of the sky had actually resonated with the Bodhi Buddha heart. It was too much of a coincidence that the heart of the sky had resonated with the Bodhi Buddha heart at this time. The sky-punishing demonic chi, the heart of the sky, and the Bodhi Buddha heart. There must be some kind of connection between these three. Perhaps these three hearts were also related to the heavenly sacred heart in Cher's body. The Bodhi seed before him clearly knew many secrets about the heart of the sky and the Bodhi Buddha heart, but he did not tell Nie Tian about his plans. At this time, the Bodhi seed suddenly exclaimed. His expression suddenly sank as he asked in shock, "Why does your body have the sky-punishing demonic chi?" Nyetian frowned and could not help but be stunned. He did not expect that the Bodhi seed could even sense the sky-punishing demonic chi. Previously in the canyon, his heart of the sky had resonated with the sky-punishing demonic chi, and that demonic chi had been absorbed by the heart of the sky. Even Nye Tian himself had not sensed the aura of the sky-punishing demonic chi, but the Bodhi seed had actually sensed it. This was too strange. Could it be that the sky-punishing demon lord has returned? In the next moment, before Nye Tian could speak, the Bodhi seed's expression darkened and he exclaimed in shock. Sky-punishing demon lord? Nye Tian's eyes trembled, and he could not help but be stunned. The sky-punishing demon lord that the Bodhi seed mentioned, could it be the emperor of the underworld? The Bodhi seed was so young, he should not have known the emperor of the underworld, right? Nye Tian, I'm sorry. At this time, the Bodhi seed's expression changed again, and he spoke coldly. His body instantly surged with a strong murderous intent. You want to kill me? Nye Tian frowned and his expression changed. The Bodhi seed was fine just now, why did he suddenly reveal such a strong murderous intent? Your heart of the sky, I want it. The corner of the Bodhi seed's mouth curled into a cold smile as he said coldly. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed, and the corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile as he said in a deep voice, You are really greedy. You already have the Bodhi Buddha's heart, and you still want the heart of the sky. Humph. The Bodhi seed sneered and said, You should know that the heart of the sky has another name, the heaven and earth sword heart. I am a swordsman, and my nickname is Blind Sword. Your heaven and earth sword heart is what I need the most. Blind Sword Bodhi seed, this name had appeared in the mouth of the Wolf King, Su Qing. He was the leader of the Wolf Knight 9 Wolves. Su Kuanga, Yin Liujie, Liang Gue, and the others were all cultivators of the 9 Wolves, but they were far from being comparable to the Bodhi seed. As the leader of the 9 Wolves, although the Bodhi seed only had a cultivation of the 5th stage of heaven rhythm, his aura was much stronger than Su Kuanga and the others. Nye Tian didn't know who the Blind Sword was, and his mouth curled into a cold smile as he said, You want the heart of the sky, do you have the ability to do so? Previously, he had stopped the wolf pack from entering the valley, which could be considered as a great help to the Bodhi seed. However, this person didn't thank him, but instead repaid his kindness with enmity, wanting the heart of the sky. How could he not be angry? Although the Bodhi seed was strong, Nye Tian wasn't a pushover either. Nye Tian wasn't afraid of a real battle,